Welcome to stage 4 of the OVO Tour of Britain. That is the beautiful site of Warwick Castle, the stage entirely held in Warwickshire for the very first time, I may say. And the stage starting in Nuneaton, finishing in Royal Leamington Spa. 114 miles, 183.5 kilometres. Another undulating day. We've had a big change around on the general classification after a very explosive stage in Bristol yesterday. Short but sweet, 45.5 kilometres an hour average speed. And we have a new leader, Pat Bevan of BMC, yesterday's stage winner Julian Alaphilippe of Quick Step Floors. The 59th victory that was at the time. Another victory in the afternoon by Elia Viviani means his team have had 60 victories this year. But another longer day in the saddle today. Starting in Nuneaton, heading all the way south for the vast majority of the day before swinging back up in a northerly direction. We have 3 climbs facing the riders today as we take a look at Kenilworth Castle, one of the many beautiful sights in this part of the world. We have the climbs of Ilmington, Edgehill and Burton Dasset to tackle today. 3 second category climbs. We then have a sprint in Southam before the run-in to the line. A nasty left-hand turn just before the finish. But some beautiful sights. Let's have a little look back at what happened on yesterday's very, very explosive stage. Fast and furious from the very, very off. Big changes on the general classification, as I've already mentioned. The Tour of Britain always serves up a treat in terms of spectacular racing. And yesterday, well, it certainly delivered one of the best days racing I've seen for a long time. As we linger upon the shots, understandably, of Warwick Castle. Been there on a few occasions myself. It is absolutely beautiful. Worth a day out. One of my favourite counties indeed. Here we go. Welcome to the OVO Tour of Britain Stage 4. First off, we look back at yesterday's stage, Stage 3, Bristol to Bristol. It was a short stage, 79 miles, 127 kilometres. An extremely fast start to the day. Attacking left, right and centre. First sprint of the day went to Mads Versmit of Katusha. 46 kilometres passed in the first hour. And finally, the elastic started to break. Several riders trying to go clear on the climb of Cheddar Gorge, including Andre Greipel, the winner of Stage 1. Tony Martin, the 4 times world time trial champion, then went clear and took an elite band with him as well. Mould of Jelti Condor, Angela Tulik and Ben Swift. And then we hit the first category ascent near the back end of the race with only 7 Ks to go of Providence Lane. It was Tom Pidcock of Wiggins who went clear. And then a depleted bunch led by Mads Versmit on the left-hand side. It was Pat Bevan. But then emerging from the centre for another win number 9 of the year, was Julian Alaphilippe of Quick Step Floors, perfectly teed up by his teammate Bob Youngles. It was a grind to the line, but no doubt about the winner. Pat Bevan in second position. Lipins of One Pro Cycling in third. But the second place of Pat Bevan meant that he took over the lead of the green OVO jersey. And there we go, confirmation of the status on the general classification going into Stage 4. Pat Bevan of BMC in New Zealand leads on the same time as Cameron Mayer, the winner of Stage 2. Julian Alaphilippe moves up to 3rd place. And this is what the riders are facing today. Beautiful route through Warwickshire, heading south, or north briefly, then through Kenilworth, Wellesbourne, 2 sprints, then through to Ilmington, first KOM of the day, then over Edgehill, a climb that me and Brian know very well. Burton Dasset, and heading gradually in a northwesterly direction to the finish in Royal Leamington Spa. 127 miles, 79. So one of the longest stages of the day, of the week in fact, before the team time trial tomorrow. This was the start earlier on today in Nuneaton. Around 17 degrees, only a very gentle breeze blowing. So Pat Bevan, your race leader, in the green jersey. Julian Alaphilippe in the blue jersey of points leader, just on the left-hand side. Very, very similar to the Quick Step Floors jersey. The KOM Skoda leaders jersey of the King of the Mountains. That's on the shoulders of Scott Davis from Dimension Data. And then Matt Teggart leads the Eidsberg sprint classification. He was just on the right-hand side in the red. But as we've been very used to, great crowds on the route. A long neutral section of just under 8 kilometres for the riders before the very, very quick expected start. It was Wiggins on the offensive very early on, driving the bunch. Tom Moses from JLT Condor also forcing the pace, one of the animators earlier in the week. Always eager to get in a breakaway. And finally, a breakaway did snap the elastic and started to move clear. Nicholas Lamini, the early leader of the King of the Mountains, was there. And the first hotspot sprint of the day, well, that actually went to Matt Holmes. Good sprint by him on the left-hand side for Madison Genesis, just ahead of Alex Patton of Canyon Eidsberg. Third on that occasion was Hayden McCormick. That was just through Kenilworth. And then the second sprint of the day in Wellesbourne. A long lead out there by McCormick. Also in the mix there, Matt Holmes just on the left-hand side, sneaking past to take maximum points just ahead of Tom Moses. So Moses second, as we just join, should I say, live pictures. First climb of the day at Ilmington. The climb of Ilmington, 2.1 kilometres in length. 5% gradient, so not overly steep. But this is the break that has dominated proceedings so far today, with a lead of just under 2 minutes, with just over 90 kilometres to go. Nicholas Lamini is there of Team Dimension Data. He's just there on the right-hand side, just moving up in the white jersey with the large Q on his back. The early leader of the King of the Mountains classification after breaking away on day one. Tom Moses, number 53 there for JLT Condor, in the maroon and blue kit. Hayden McCormack is there from New Zealand, representing One Pro Cycling, number 83. Paul Orslin is there for Direct Energy, just throwing his bottle, hopefully being picked up by a spectator. Matt Holmes, who's taken the maximum points on the first two intermediate sprints of the day for Madison Genesis, already been in one of the breakaways earlier in the week. And rounding out our group of 6 riders is Alex Patton, 28 years of age, representing Canyon Eidsberg, hails from Dover. And again, 1 minute and 50 seconds. This has pretty much been the maximum lead they've had. Well, it's hovered at around 2 minutes. And alongside me for the journey to Royal Leamington Spa today, again, is Brian Smith. Classic start to the stage, very, very quick. But as opposed to yesterday, with that shorter stage, Brian, it took quite a long time for the group to go clear. They then got caught near the end. But this is a more traditional holding pattern that we're seeing today.
Very much so. The breakaway's gone away. I'm not too sure, with a time gap of roughly about 2 minutes, and it's been there pretty much all day. 4 teams riding on the front: Quick Step Floors, BMC, Mitchelton Scott and Lotto Soudal. So the situation we've got is the breakaway I think will have to be content with the kind of intermediate sprints and King of the Mountains points. They'll battle it out for those. As for going the whole way, well, it's a good size breakaway of 6 riders, but I think with the 4 teams interested in bringing it back for a sprint at the end, I think it's going to be very tough for them. You know, I'm anticipating a sprint from possibly Gaviria. Mitchelton Scott obviously have Caleb Ewan. Caleb Ewan was up there yesterday. Sasha Modulo was up there yesterday. It was just a little bit too difficult in the end. Lotto Soudal looking for another stage win from Andrew Greipel. So I think it's going to be a sprint finish in the end, but for the time being, the crowds will just have to enjoy what they're seeing in front of them, and we're going to see, I think, Nick Lamini take some points at top of this climb. It won't put him into the overall lead. Scott Davis is on 26 points. Lamini is on 13, but with 8 points, he could get somewhat closer to his teammate.
Of course, Dimension Data have dominated that particular jersey. Maximum points scored on stage 2, of course, by the leader Scott Davis. And stage 1, it was Nick Lamini who got the jersey. At the moment, Scott Davis, as you mentioned, had 26 points, a pretty good lead over Bob Youngles, who has 17 points. And we have Cameron Mayer, 14, and then down in 6th place is Lamini. But there are opportunities. Well, today there could be a maximum. There is a maximum on the road of 24 points on offer. 8 points are awarded to the top of second category climbs, 10 points awarded to first category climbs, and there are 3 second category climbs today. You can just see Jens Kukalera there. It's on the right hand side for Lotto, just rolling up the climb. Nice tempo on the flat, but on the climbs they certainly won't press things on a bit. They'll just ride well within themselves and lift the pace as they go over the top. But this is a longer climb, just over 2Ks, but a relatively modest gradient. Steeper at the bottom, but with an average of only 5%. Nothing that will cause these riders too much harm. And then Edge Hill, a little bit steeper, only short, but a flat lower section. That comes in just a few kilometres time. And it kicks up over the top, averages 10%, but the second half of that climb is quite steep. But classic illustration here of how the peloton control things, isn't it? Faster on the flat, one long line, then on the climbs they essentially knock things back, although they certainly won't be going much slower than the group out in front, but it is a time here to really just knock things back, so the riders making the tempo on the flat are rested and recovered and can just pick things up rather than putting themselves into the red. Yeah,
I think they will be going slower than the riders on the front. They are racing for the top of the climb, but these guys aren't. Jens Kukeler is front for Lotto Soudal, like you say, Matt. They'll ride a higher tempo on the flat, on the rolling roads. Robert Power for Mitchelton Scott, there's Miles Scottson on the right-hand side there for BMC. But these guys are racing for the points, so the gap you can see in the top of the screen is starting to increase, purely because they're saving their energy for over the top of the climb, and then they'll get into formation again, and the peloton will stretch out. Just looking at Tom Moses here, he's going to go for a long one, so we're going to see a bit of a race for these mountain points. Nobody's giving it up.
Certainly not, just over the top, left that very, very late, but Tom Moses does sit in 11th. He's already got 10 points, so still a few stages to go. But look at this, just on the right-hand side, Matt Holmes, well, he's bossing the intermediate classification. He just takes it there from Dlamini. Tom Moses in third, so very, very good sprint there by Matt Holmes, who's absolutely on fire today. Took the first intermediate sprint and the second one as well, and now takes the first King of the Mountains of the day. So maximum points for him. Just looking a little bit further down to see how many points Holmes has actually scored. I think that'll be the first time he's actually on the score sheet. But Moses scores a couple of points there, but no doubt about the winner there. Matt Holmes, very, very strong at the moment. Normally you see riders sharing out the sprints and the King of the Mountains, but showing no mercy at all. Almost a cannibal of the breakaways so far today. An interesting conversation here amongst the breakaway. Tom Moses there having a word with Matt Holmes and saying, well, you might have heard, simply asked him what he was doing. And it's quite an interesting one. Here we go. I mean, it was a perfectly clean sprint from Matt Holmes, but he's won the first two intermediate sprints. He's nowhere up there in the general classification of the King of the Mountains. And it's quite an interesting one, Brian, isn't it? Matt Holmes has the perfect right to sprint for whatever he wants. Do you think it's just an illustration of a little bit of frustration there from Tom Moses, who was trying to go for the intermediate sprints, got beaten by Holmes, and has been beaten again there? Or do you think, again, it's one of these unwritten rules of cycling? When you're in a breakaway, you work together, and generally speaking, there's almost an agreement that you share out the points from the sprints and the King of the Mountains. What are your thoughts on that? I
think you're right that Holmes has every right to go for it. It doesn't really matter. I think by the looks of things, Moses went for a long one, and you know, they're expecting the points to be kind of shared out today, and they've been battling for the sprints competition, and now we're seeing battling for the King of the Mountains, which I think is great to see. Let them compete, let them. You never know what's going to happen in the next few days. Matt Holmes taking his first points. He took 8 points at the top of that climb, so he's taking his first mountain points, or should I say hill points. And then Dlamini taking second there. He was looking really good in the first stage, where he took maximum points 13. He's put another 7 points on, so he's 20 points down. And then you've got Moses, who also has some points at the start of today's stage, and he'll move up in that competition, so he's got 16 points. So already we're seeing a battle. Scott Davis still leads that competition, but you can only think with 2 climbs to come, the leading group of 6 riders, I think, will stay away until that stage. So it's going to be a battle for that the mountains jersey as well. And Matt Holmes, if he can take some more maximum points, will go up to 24 points. But you can only think that Moses, with points in the bag already, and Dlamini of Team Dimension Data with the most points, they, I think, will battle out for that jersey. But if Matt Holmes gets himself 24 points today, gets himself in another breakaway in another stage, then he could take that jersey, not today, but possibly in another stage, and that's what he's thinking about. As a sports director, Colin Sturgis is in the car, and he's every right to go for the sprints, the intermediate sprints, which he's already won, both of them, and if he wins the next one, he becomes equal at the top of the leaderboard with Teggart from Wiggins. So that means that it'll go down to how many first places they've got. Well, both of them have got 3 first places. Then it goes down to second places. None of them have got placed in any other sprint, so it'll go down to the general classification, where Matt Holmes is by far the best rider. So Matt Holmes for Madison Genesis, he's looking to what he can get out the stage. When you get yourself in a breakaway, you look at your options, you look at what you can get out today's stage, and he's got every right to go for the King of the Mountains, as most riders would think. Well, you're looking to take the sprints, maybe competition, and obviously the seconds that go with it, but let us fight out the King of the Mountains. Well, we've seen it in other tours. I think Pete Williams was going for sprints and King of the Mountains.
I think he didn't quite pull it off, but he wore both. He was leading both classifications and has in fact won the sprints on 2 separate classifications. Pete Williams riding this race for One Pro Cycling, but I think you're quite right. I mean, when you look, this is a long race, and there's no gifts at all. Clearly, they're working together, but.
What I will say, Matt, is we don't know what the conversation was between
beforehand.
If they had a general agreement, but it does look as if maybe the agreement was we don't waste too much energy, we leave it, we sprint it out. Maybe Moses went for a long one, and we don't know what the conversation is between the riders, but Matt Holmes has got every right to sprint for as many points as possible. He's got himself in the breakaway, and luckily the riders will combine together and try and keep this advantage. I don't think it will be fruitful today, but you have to put points in the bag for other days to come, and that's what Matt Holmes is doing.
Yeah, no, it's a long race. This is stage 4. Once we've finished today, we'll be at half distance. Of course, the team time trial, there are no points scored in any of the classifications tomorrow apart from GC, and then we have the mountaintop finish on the same climb up in the Lake District. So you can't blame Matt Holmes, and a lot of that will have come from the Direct Sportif. It's certainly the plan for riding in the breakaway, the way he rides in the breakaway. A lot of it will be dictated by feel, but in terms of the strategic element, how much he rides, what is going to be the focus, I'd imagine quite clearly just by the way Matt Holmes is riding. He is the best placed of this breakaway, as you said, but no real sights on the GC. It is about trying to secure a jersey, and you're not guaranteed anything in this race at all. So to give yourself the best chance you can in the King of the Mountains and in the hotspot sprints, if you're feeling good, and he's showing everybody a clean pair of heels, very, very sprightly, really sharp and crisp accelerations from Matt Holmes. You can't blame him at all. But as you said, you quite rightly pointed out, quite often you get conversation between the riders in the breakaway, especially between riders who know each other well. You know, they're going to combine and say, look, let's look after each other, let's keep this break going. But how about we share things out equitably? I'll go for the KOMs, you go for the hotspots. But I've been in conversations like that before, and when it comes to the sprints themselves, it can all go to pot, can't it? And I think that's why there might have been a little bit of a disagreement. We don't know, but it just shows. I think it's just quite fascinating, the conversations that go on within the breakaways between riders who know each other exceptionally well, and both Moses and Matt Holmes will know each other very well from riding primarily on the British circuit together. But it was interesting to see that frustration there from Tom.
Yeah, you asked the question, what you're doing, but some of the times, most of the time, they don't get that option. The instruction comes from the car behind, and
exactly.
It looks like Madison Genesis have decided that they want to get as much benefit out of this stage as much as possible. They're looking at it with 83 kilometres to go. They've got 2 minutes. They've had pretty much 2 minutes all day. They know that they're not going to get anything out the stage today, with the possibility of a stage win or up there on the stage. So they're looking at banking as many points in both competitions as much as possible. And we're going to see this as we go along. The only 2 riders not competing for the intermediate sprint is Lamini and Ursuline of Direct Energy. The 4 other riders are competing for the points, and rightly so, because for a domestic team it's important, and when you bank points in the certain competitions, of the King of the Hills and the sprints, then you can look at getting in a break another day, but it's not guaranteed you'll get in a break in another day. That's the thing.
Indeed. 82.7 kilometres to go. The gap holding at 2:05. Welcome back. 2 minutes and 2 seconds for our lead break of 6 riders with just over 80 kilometres to go. This is around about the maximum lead that they've enjoyed so far today. They pretty much hit the most southerly point of today's circuit, or lap as it were. Essentially we are doing a lap around the Warwickshire lanes. Beautiful Warwickshire lanes. It is an absolutely stunning part of England. They've just gone over the climb of Ilmington, and the maximum points taken there by Matt Holmes, just on the back there, the first points he has scored in the King of the Mountains classification, just in front of Nick Dlamini, who's moved himself well back up into contention. That classification being led by his teammate Scott Davis of Great Britain. They're now going to swing in a easterly direction just to the outskirts of Banbury, another beautiful town. They then swing left up towards Edge Hill, and for the rest of the day they're primarily going to be heading into a headwind, only a light headwind though, very, very gentle winds today, around 17 degrees, gentle breeze of about 7 miles an hour, but through these very sheltered lanes. And there we go, that's the confirmation of that climb. Second category climb, Holmes from Dlamini, the former leader of that classification, then Moses, Orselin, Patton, McCormick, Jens Kukalera leads the bunch over just in front of the Aussie Rob Power of Mitchelton Scott. So 2 more climbs to go today in the King of the Mountains classification. A climb of Edge Hill, then we have Burton Dassett, and the crest of the final climb of the day comes with still a fair distance to go, Brian. I don't think it's going to be, from the general classification situation, quite as decisive as we see Sylvain Chavanel. Pretty relaxed there.
That was interesting, and that was interesting to see that the result of the first King of the Mountains there, Matt, that Scott Davis never competed for the minor points. So it does look as if he got himself in a breakaway. He took that jersey, but I think it's possibly Dlamini in the first stage. He's targeting that more than maybe Scott Davis is. So it just goes to show you that the fact that Scott Davis never took any points, he could have come up, because they weren't really racing in the peloton. He could have taken the other points. It goes down to 8 places, and he could have taken some of the minor points there. And if he takes 2 points in that climb, 2 points in the next couple of climbs, he adds 6 points, so he can still stay up there in that competition. So it does look as if Team Dimension Data have decided Scott Davis possibly look for a stage win, probably look for doing something later on in the race. Dlamini, you're in the breakaway, you try and take that jersey back. And
Dlamini as well is looking pretty sharp, not quite as sharp as Matt Holmes today. Matt Holmes was very, very sprightly on that first climb, and all of the intermediate sprints as well. But no, I tend to agree with you. I think it's all about getting Dlamini to score as many points as he can, and based on the performance on that first climb, even if Dlamini runs top 3 on the next 2 climbs, he is going to go into the lead of that classification. Still a fair distance to go, of course, but I think the bunch being led at the moment by BMC, Miles Scottson there, the surprise national road race champion a couple of years ago now. He's got the bands on the tips of his sleeves. Great young rider. Not too sure where he's heading next year. Maybe staying with the newly branded up BMC CCC team. As we look at Sylvain Chavanel, legendary rider, very, very likeable figure. Was it his 19th tour this year? 19th Tour de France, or his 18th Tour de France? He was up just under 20, wasn't it? But a very well respected figure, and just very easily making his way back through the peloton. No real hardship for him to get back on. Looked pretty relaxed, didn't he? And at these sorts of speeds, with the peloton the length that it is, riders getting a wheel change or a mechanical shouldn't experience too many problems getting back on, Brian.
No, not at all, especially a rider of that experience. It was just a quick wheel change and a bit of a change of scene sometimes.
Sometimes you can have a nice bit of a stretch as well, can't you? Oh, stretch your back out.
When you're bowling along like this and, you get puncture and stop and talk to the mechanics, see everybody in the team car, and sometimes it's nice to, when you're rolling through the cars behind, say hello to a few of the other sports directors that you may be been in a team before, and you come back. The other time is when you stop for a natural break and you come back through the peloton, and I mean, when a stage like this, when it's being controlled, you have to try and entertain yourself a little bit, and you know, it's nice just to drop back and see some people in the team cars behind.
Indeed, it's actually not too much of an arduous experience riding back through the bunch. It's different when it's at the back end of the race, when the hammer has really gone down. Then it can become panic stations, and quite often, depending on how critical a point of the race is, you'll get. Depending on the commissaire, of course, the referee of the race, they can actually put what's known as a barrage up, so they will not allow cars to pass the rider who's had a mechanical failure, especially riders who've been dropped. But even, I mean, there are some different interpretations of the rules, aren't there? I mean, the discretion is often used, and should be used by commissaires, but quite often you get commissaires interpreting the rules in a very arbitrary fashion, black and white, as it were, and putting barrages up. And that can be quite problematic. So it basically means the rider has to shut the gap themselves. The beauty of the long convoy means that the riders can not expend too much extra energy. They're going to have to move faster than the bunch to, of course, regain contact, but using the slipstream of the vehicles, there can be almost, not quite effortless, but it can be relatively easy. But once you move the cars out of the gap and the rider has to ride hard, it's a completely different experience, Brian, isn't it? It really can be quite a challenge, and often, when the hammer's down, almost impossible to get back on.
It is, and they do barrages quite a lot, the referees, especially when the race is on. When it's the race is off, it's quite easy, as you say, moving around, getting back to the peloton, but they try not aids when there's a kind of a racing gap. They try not help, and you know, that's why the kind of barrages are put in, and that's what the commissaires are there to do their job, really, because they don't want to, you know, others that are getting dropped to benefit from it. But in hilly stages, when you're getting dropped, you get dropped. That's it. You're not going to be featuring in the finish anyway. But yeah, yesterday we saw a good final, very difficult. About 30 odd, maybe 40 riders coming to the finishing line. It was a very difficult finish. This finish is somewhat different. We come into the town of Royal Leamington Spa. We've got a corner with about 300 metres to go. It kind of rises up a little bit, levels towards, towards the finish. And yesterday we heard that a couple of riders never looked at their road book and their manual as much as they should have done, made a couple of mistakes. Well, every race it's important to look at the manual.
Indeed. As we just see Tom Moses, it's been to Christian House. Christian House retired, it was last year, or maybe the year before. Spent I think spent his last couple of years with one pro, but the team that he spent the vast majority of his career with, and indeed won the British road title, is GLT Condor, or Rapper Condor as they were known, the team run by John Herity, the stalwart of the British scene. Has been an extremely important and influential figure in establishing a team that's had a really long and healthy life. There's seen some wonderful riders brought through the ranks, but now, as is the natural progression of things, riders often, when they finish racing, end up in the car, passing on their experience, and an opportunity there, getting a beat on, and a bit of a tactical chat, bit of a morale boost as well. 75 k's to go. So Quick Step Floors in the blue there, leading the chase. Lotto just behind. And now a chat from another one of the breakaway riders, Hayden McCormick, 24-year-old rider from New Zealand. It's not very often you see Aston Martin road bikes, is it? It's not a brand that sort of rolls off the tongue in terms of, but there we go, one pro. They have Aston Martin cars to use as team cars, and very, very shiny Aston Martin road bikes as well. There we go, James Bond road bikes. No comment there from Brian. But not much more you can say about that, really, is there? But very shiny road bikes indeed to One Pro Cycling. But McCormack, very solid rider indeed, second in this year's National Road Race Championships of New Zealand earlier in the year. Fifth in the Commonwealth Games road race as well. Won the overall classification of the week-long New Zealand Classic stage race as well. But certainly won't be in One Pro Cycling colours next year, because the team won't be having a men's squad. They'll be moving over or focusing on trying to assemble a women's World Tour team, which is great to hear. But it will be interesting to see where the male riders from that squad move on to. But Hayden McCormack certainly has had a very solid season so far. But I do think it's going to be challenging for this break to stay away at the moment. The bunch not letting anything go. Of course, that breakaway that we saw dominate proceedings on stage 2. A real illustration of how, well, first an illustration of how strong both Tonelli and Cameron Mayer were, of course. But more importantly, how sometimes the bunch can get it wrong. And quick-step floors in particular, Lotto Soudal, Mitchelton Scott aren't going to want to make the same mistake again, because assuming their sprinters, Caleb Ewan, Andre Greipel, Fernando Gaviria, get over this climb in one piece, there's a fair distance to go from the top of the last climb to the finish. You'd say on paper it should be one for the sprinters. That's why they're not taking any chances at all and making sure this lead doesn't go out too far at all.
I think it will be one for the sprinters. When you look at team time trial tomorrow, okay, it's only short, but a lot of the teams will be wanting to save as much energy for that as much as possible. Looking at the first sprints, you have to say that Gaviria, Caleb Ewan and Andre Greipel are pretty much the top 3 sprinters in this race. Be good to see some of the others trying to get up there, but they definitely look as if they are the strongest sprinters in the race. Gaviria went on the final climb, maybe never done his homework, and realised that the road went up a bit more towards the top of the climb and got distanced. Modulo was there towards the finish. It'll be interesting to see if Dan McClay is feeling somewhat better today. A good positioning on that final corner with 300 metres to go, I think is going to be key to this stage, although it does kind of rise up a little bit towards the finishing line. 300 metres, if you've got a strong lead out like quick-step floors, very important that you get good positioning into that final corner of today's stage. But for sure, it does look as if this is panning out to be a sprint finish, with both Gaviria and Caleb Ewan's team pushing hard on the front, together with Lotto Soudal, with Greipel. BMC are there purely because they're leading the race. I was a bit surprised yesterday with Tonelli. I thought Tonelli would have been in that front group. I've not heard anything. I've kind of checked, trying to find out. I don't think he had any mechanic or anything happened.
He finished on his own. Yeah,
he finished with a small group just behind, which was a surprise to me because he's a strong rider, and although he would have lost the race lead, he would have still been up there.
He certainly would. Well, Tonelli yesterday, as you look at some more mechanical shenanigans going on again, it is Sylvain Chavanel clearly having a little bit of an issue. I think he's using normal caliper brakes on that particular bike, so it should be relatively easy to sort things out. I think he looks all right now.
Looks as if he's changing bike now, because he just gave his bottle in, or he's just getting a replenished bottle. But
interesting. Yeah,
sometimes the races, there's a spare bike for every rider in the team, and it's a lot easier now with only having 6 riders in the peloton now. All teams have 2 cars. Normally, one of the cars looks at the breakaway. If you get a rider on the breakaway, the other car stays behind. Sometimes we've seen it in the past that they don't actually put a rider up, a car up behind the breakaway to service a rider. Some teams come here just with a 1 team car, but in a stage race like that, you're allowed 2 team cars, and that's to make sure you service and you've got spare bikes for all.
Well, there is the site of Stratford-on-Avon. Absolutely beautiful place, home of Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare's County, Warwickshire is known as. We're just skirting by Stratford-upon-Avon. Don't quite go through it. Go through some beautiful places today. Just skirting the edge of Banbury. And we go through Burton Dasset. Not too far south of Coventry today. That's where the vast majority of the route takes place. So we started just north of Coventry and Nuneaton, headed north briefly before swinging in a primarily southerly direction just to the east of Birmingham, the second city of England, of course. But the riders still have 2 categorised climbs to tackle today in 1 hotspot sprint. So Edge Hill, that comes at 136k. They drop off the top, another little spike, then they drop down again to Burton Dasset. That comes at 146 kilometres. And they drop off the top of Burton Dasset, head towards Southam. That'll be where the final hotspot sprint is. Then the run in to the line. It's an up and down run in to Royal Leamington Spa, but the last 3 or 4 kilometres essentially flat with that nasty left-hander. As we just see Hugh Carthy in pink just taking a natural break. He is the best placed of the British riders at the moment. He's sitting in 9th place on the general classification. 19 seconds behind the race leader Pat Bevan. In the green jersey, Cameron Mayer still sits in second place overall, moving up to third overall, should I say, after yesterday's win. Julian Alaphilippe of Quick Step Floors, looking very dangerous. That was his 9th win yesterday. In 4th place, representing Germany, but riding for Movistar, Jas Sutterlin. Then we have Wout Poels, Chris Hamilton, Bob Jungels, Primoz Roglic, Hugh Carthy, and then Scott Davis of Dimension Data, still sitting well inside the top 10 there at 22 seconds. So still pretty closely packed to the top of the GC. As you said, surprised to see Tonelli distanced yesterday. He lost 51 seconds. But the team time trial tomorrow is going to be absolutely crucial, because I'm expecting there, although it's only 14 kilometres in length, it's all uphill. I'm expecting there to be some very, very big splits, and it's going to be fascinating to see how the teams tackle it. We'll talk about it in a few moments' time after this next commercial break that's coming up. Still a lot of racing to go today, though. Destination Royal Leamington Spa. Welcome back to Shakespeare's County. The stage today entirely held within the boundaries of Warwickshire. 69.9 kilometres to go, still for the peloton today, being led by Lotto Soudal, in particular Jens Kukelera. It's been at the head of affairs for the vast majority of the day. Robert Power just sat behind him. Very strong young Australian riding for Mitchelton Scott. Another Aussie just behind there. Miles Scottson, the former champion. And then in the blue, just tucked in behind Elio Kaiser. Meanwhile, up the road, let's run through our breakaways if you've just joined us. Just sat on the front there is Paul Orslin, the Frenchman riding for Direct Energie. Sitting behind there, riding for Madison Genesis in the black, blue and orange kit, rather fetching kit indeed, is Matthew Holmes, the winner of the first 2 intermediate sprints today and the first King of the Mountains, so really hoovering up the points. Also in the move, just rolling through on the front there, number 13. Who for the first time has actually inverted his number on the back, a tradition we do see in cycling to essentially negate any bad luck, is Nick Lamini of South Africa. Second on the opening climb of the day, moving back towards the head of affairs in the King of the Mountains classification, a previous wearer of that jersey. Also there is Hayden McCormack of One Pro Cycling in the white and blue kit, representing New Zealand. Alex Patton is also there for Canyon Iceberg. And the final rider of our 6 in front is Tom Moses, 26 years of age now, of JLT Condor. A solid breakaway, but the bunch pretty compact today, no real stresses. Many of the riders yesterday, Brian, following the stage, which, reminding you, was run off at 45.5 kilometres an hour. Alex Dowsett, particularly vociferous on social media, just saying it was absolutely insane, in a good way. You know, it was just absolutely out of control almost. But it's great. It's a great spectacle to watch. Very hard to race, but more and more people, I think, calling for these shorter, faster stages. They do make for a very exciting spectacle, but I think also we do need longer stages in the mix. But I think now and again those short stages really do animate things, and it proved it yesterday. We had a very explosive, exciting, thrilling finale. I
think the whole route of the this year's Tour of Britain is conducive to some fast, aggressive racing. Like we were saying in the first stage, it's not a brutal parkour or route this year. I don't think we need it. There are many climbs across, and we've raced on a lot of them, pretty brutal climbs. And I think yesterday's stage, everybody knew that with that type of finish, they wanted to make it hard. And unfortunately, for the breakaway at the end, there was no rider there from Quick Step Floors. They chased it down. Could have been maybe somewhat different, but it was a great stage, great attacking racing pretty much all the way towards the finishing line. Today is very much different, controlled, although they're clicking along here at a good pace. You've got 4 teams riding on the front, Quick Step Floors, BMC, Mitchelton Scott and Lotto Soudal, so 4 teams interested in making sure that this group of 6 riders in front doesn't gain too much time. The situation in the breakaway, you know that you're not going to stay towards the finish, so you're not going to really commit 100% to the success of this breakaway. There's about 4 riders interested in the 2 King of the Mountains points coming up shortly, and you know that's going to be a race within itself. And at the moment, they're just kind of rolling through. The top of the climb, the next climb comes with 47.5, and then we're down a descent, up a small climb, and then onto the final climb of the day. So they come very close together. Interesting to see if they actually race it. If they race an Edge Hill and one of the riders keeps going to the second climb, so it'll be interesting to see. But we will see a race within a race, because very important for these intermediate competitions, because I think the breakaway, knowing that they've been kept at 2 minutes, they're saving their energy a little bit. They're saving their energy to race over these couple of climbs to get the maximum points. I don't think they're saving any energy thinking that they'll go to way to the finish.
No, I think you're right. As we just see Nick Dlamini there being spoken to by Roger Hammond. Let's have a listen. A really interesting conversation there. Finally offered him a drink at the end of that. But basically, we kind of let things breathe there, because it's not very often we get to hear what the manager, the director sportif, the DS as they're known, what he's actually said to Nick Dlamini. He was basically saying the guy you've got to watch on the next climb, because Roger, you've worked with Roger yourself, Brian. We both know Roger, raced with him as well. Very tactically astute. He's watching the way this race is unfolded, and he knows the rider to watch is going to be Tom Moses, because and also Holmes, because the way they drop back, he's expecting, and they're both very quick accelerating. He said, watch these two riders, they're the only ones you've got to watch out for. You don't need to watch out for McCormack so much, or Orselin, but quite often, Brian, these shorter climbs, it's called the King of the Mountains, but let's be honest with you, in the UK, really, there are very few mountains. It should be really called King of the Hills, and quite often the climbs with the rather moderate gradients, okay, they go on for a bit, do suit riders with a bit of a kick rather than the ability to climb. So you need to get them tactically right, unless they're particularly steep and long. Then it obviously falls into the court of the pure climbers more. But a lot of these climbs do favour the punchier riders. But Nick Dlamini, looking at the way he rode on stage 1, he's pretty sharp. He's just got to make sure he gets it right tactically to score as many points as he can. But it's quite interesting hearing that conversation. Obviously, Nick Dlamini, South African, hasn't got that local knowledge. And I've actually raced with Rog on a few times on these very, very roads, including the next climb of Edge Hill, which we both know very well from a junior road race series race. It's got to be 25 years ago now, back when things were black and white. But it's very interesting to hear what Rog has to say there, advising his rider. There's only so much obviously Dlamini can do in terms of watching his legs, but if you watch the right rider, get the right bit of slipstream, and also have a little bit of knowledge about the climb, because Roger lives not far from here, or has done in the past. So giving him that bit of extra insight into the way the climb ebbs and flows, and where would suit that rider to accelerate best, is absolute gold dust, isn't it?
I think Tom Moses at the back here for JLT Condor set out to get in the breakaway to try and go for both competitions. He was in the breakaway the other day and scored in both competitions, so it was in his interest to try and get maximum points. Now he has to kind of readjust a little bit. He now knows that Matt Holmes is interested in both, and both of them have got every right to go for both competitions. Dlamini only interested in the Skoda King of the Mountains, and he is fast. Looking at that last sprinter on the climb, I'm not too sure Moses will get the better of either Holmes or Dlamini, and he doesn't look as if he's on the same day as the other two riders, and possibly doesn't have the legs. So I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, that it'll be interesting to see that they're kind of hanging out there at 2 minutes. The bunch aren't kind of pushing on here. We see a lot of them kind of relaxed, and it just means that they're not pushing hard on the front. And if they're not pushing hard in the front, they're saving themselves for these two climbs coming up. The interest for me is to see if Moses does go for a long one. He may attack maybe just before the final climb. He might test them out, maybe try and distance the other ones, maybe go over the top and go to the next climb, because there is only less than 10 kilometres between the top of each climb. So it's going to be an interesting one. Tom Moses has to think about it. He doesn't have the legs to beat the other two. If he wants to take maximum points in these two climbs, then he has to think about possibly taking a quick one and possibly going up the road and trying to distance the others.
We will soon find out. The sight of the peloton just weaving their way through the beautiful patchwork quilt look to the fields here. A wonderful Warwickshire heading back in a gradually northerly direction at the moment. The wind will be coming from the left-hand side in their face. It's picked up a little bit, but plenty of shelter from the beautiful hedgerows here. Robert Powett taking his turn on the front. An exceptional rider, has really come through this year. I remember watching him ride very, very strongly. I think he might have just finished top 10 or just outside the top 10 in Strade Bianche earlier in the year. And just behind him, Miles Scottson, the ever-present Ilio Kaiser in the blue. And just back, about 5th or 6th wheel, the green jersey of Pat Bevan of New Zealand, leader of this race on the general classification, on the same time, of course, as Cameron Mayer. On their count back on stages, then the flotilla of riders from Team Sky. In the white jerseys there, the best placed rider from Team Sky, currently sitting in 5th place on the general classification. That is Walt Poles. From the start has been their protected rider. As we drift back, really interesting to see, Brian. And more than ever, there's Bardiani, CSF, Wiggins, the rest of the One Pro riders, Mitchelton, Scott. That is real colour blocking, isn't it? I mean, you quite often see midway through a stage, sometimes the colour blocking can break up a little bit, but you can just see Mobistar down there in the blue, Lotto and Il Jumbo in the yellow. They're not taking any chances. There seems to be increasingly now real discipline with the teams to make sure that they seem to stick together. I mean, at the front, at the start, they have to be there or thereabouts covering all the moves, but once things have settled down, you really do see some quite distinct blocking of teams, riders just making sure they're at or near the team leader should anything happen. And I've on numerous occasions been caught out on stages like this when all it needs is a bit of an exposed crosswind section. Somebody goes to the front and splits the bunts in half, and you're wasting valuable reserves. It's very, very interesting. There's no real time in any race where you can properly hold things right back. Clearly this has established a sort of holding pattern, but you cannot completely rest on your laurels at all, can you?
I've looked at that, and you know, as the helicopter was saying, it does seem as if it's all in colour order, and it's kind of a little bit strange to see, because if anything happens, your team is there.
You've got the whole team in the back half of the bunch.
And I'm talking about if there's a crash or anything like that happen, your team's there, and you risk 2 or 3 of your riders being involved in the same incident. Well, if you kind of split up in the bunch, then the probability of there is a crash is not going to include as many teammates as you've already got. So as for and against, it really depends on the sports director as well, where you sit. And I used to say to the guys, look, in a situation very difficult to all keep in colour order, not unless you're all riding towards the front, but try not sit all together, and try and kind of split up a little bit, just in case, you know, you move the kind of probability if there is a crash in the left hand side, then not all your riders are on the left hand side. So it's one of these situations that when you look at that, you think, why is this? Okay, there's only 6-man teams, but if there's an incident, one part, like a crash or anything happens, then it will involve at least possibly 2 or 3 of your riders. Yeah,
it's almost like a case of not putting your eggs in one basket when it comes from a risk management perspective. But the gap now has come down 1 minute and 19 seconds, so extra bit of impetus being applied at the front of the peloton. You could just tell. I don't think that's the case, Matt. I think that they're saving themselves for this King of the Mountains. The shape of the bunch was in a bit of a longer line. I mean, whether they've picked things up a little bit, I don't know. But as you say, you're quite right. There's going to be a couple of riders here. 3 riders really in this group there. Although we've seen McCormack sprinting for it, the 3 riders interested in the King of the Mountains points here are Holmes, just out on the back. Glamini, the previous wearer of this jersey, just there with the black shorts, the white kit, and just in front of him is Tom Moses. And those riders, if those riders, as you say, miss the occasional turn when they're rolling through on the front, don't give it as much effort as they had earlier on, that will be noticed by the other riders in the group, and there's a knock-on effect, and the average speed of the group just slowly ebbs a little bit in a backwards direction, as riders do save themselves, because you know it's a real effort when you're sprinting for just in the intermediate sprints, especially for the King of the Mountains. The amount of energy that it takes out of you, the amount of the reserves that it digs into, it is pretty considerable. So the riders, I'd imagine as well, I remember riding races like this, being in a move and being tasked with going, not so much for hotspot sprints because I couldn't sprint for toffee, but generally King of the Mountains points, on the run-up, sort of 5 miles before, 4 miles, you'd start to feel nervous because you were waiting. You knew you were going to hurt yourself. You knew you wanted to get it right tactically, but making a max effort on a climb, it hurts. So you just want to make sure that you're fresh for when you make that effort.
I thought you said it was King of the Hills. Now you're changing it to King of the Mountains.
Wow, we've got to call it what it is in the road book. But really, I mean, it really is King. It's King of the Rollers, isn't it? In Warwickshire, there's no mountains in Warwickshire. Beautiful county, but let's face it, there's no snow-capped peaks in Shakespeare's County. That is for sure. None that I've seen, anyway.
Look, it's shot up to 1:45 now, and the situation now is the peloton have been riding at the same speed, and all of a sudden they find themselves. The breakaway is coming back. You can look at the demeanour of the riders in front, the 6 riders here. They aren't pushing hard. They're saving a lot of energy back. They know they've got a bit of a fight, especially the riders that haven't got what they wanted out of the first sprints of the first King of the Mountains, and they've kind of targeted that. The man being Tom Moses. You heard it from Roger Hammond, the sports director of Team Dimension Data. The man at the back, though, he has taken maximum points, 100% records of gaining all the maximum points so far in the sprints in the King of the Mountains. That's Matt Holmes. He is the best placed of the older riders in front at 3:48. So no real danger for BMC in the overall. But many of the riders in the front group now thinking of these King of the Mountains. But there is a couple of riders in here that have been fairly quiet. Not really been sprinting too much, although Alex Payton has finished second in the first sprints. He never featured in the second sprints, and on that last King of the Mountains he was 5th, so possibly he might be thinking, well, these guys are going to battle it out for the points. I might decide that I'm going to try and go for a long one and try and push out, but something has to happen in the group of 6. I don't think if they stay together they'll be fighting within themselves, and I think that there could be a kind of counter attack. Whether it comes from Moses going for both climbs, or whether it comes from Payton a little bit earlier on thinking of the long game and trying to go to the finish. Either or, I don't think any of the riders in the breakaway will go to the finish. I think it will be a sprint finish, and Gaviria, Caleb Ewan and Andrew Greipel will be the riders battling it out for the stage 1.
A smidgen under 59 kilometres to go now. Gap holding steady for our 6 breakaway riders at 1 minute and 44 seconds. Still weaving through these beautiful Warwickshire lanes. The first time ever that a Tour of Britain stage has raced exclusively in this rather beautiful county. The rider just sat at the back there from Movistar. That is Victor Dillepart. Looking good. Just checking what the situation is behind, and he's last man in the bunch. But the most combative rider actually yesterday, the most aggressive rider was Tony Martin of Katusha, always on the offensive. And actually, just thinking back, we're talking about Matthew Holmes, how aggressive he's been. He is a rider of real class, only 24 years of age. He's been with Madison Genesis for several seasons now, but was 5th overall in the Tour of Yorkshire last year, which was a superb ride. He really is getting stronger and stronger, and was matching some great riders on the run into the line, eager to get in some moves. And Alex Patton, as we just look at the quick step floors led peloton at the moment, Alex Patton, who's in the breakaway riding for Kenyon Eisberg, a very interesting rider, multi-discipline rider, was the junior cyclocross champion of Great Britain several years ago, I think back in 2007, 2008. And was actually on the Olympic development team for mountain biking as well before moving over to the road. So Alex Patton, multi-disciplined, but really driving the front group along exceptionally well today, but sits the most lowly of all our riders in the lead break at 21 minutes and 35 seconds. And the best placed rider from the 6-man move out in front is Matt Holmes at 3 minutes and 48. So as Brian mentioned earlier on, no real threat at all for the general classification. No worries for Pat Bevan there in the green jersey. Sat in about 5th or 6th position. It's all about the sprinters teams today. And the only pure sprint we've had in this race, of course, was on stage 1, won by Andre Greipel. That's why we see Lotto in second position there. Caleb Ewan was in second position. So Mitchelton Scott in third there, helping with the pacemaking. And back up to the front. And as we get ever closer to the second climb of the day, the climb of Edge Hill. It's only a short climb, but a steep second half. It's categorised at 800 metres long, averaging 9.9%, but a gradual first 500 metres, and it's the last 300 metres, Brian, that really kicks up. A couple of hairpin bends, as I seem to remember, but must be about 10 or 12% the last 400 metres. So timing is going to be crucial, but there's a long run up to it before you can, and you can see it looming in the distance. Gone. It's a climb we've raced on quite a lot.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be interesting to see how the riders play this one, especially in the front group. Matt Holmes seems to be on a super day today, and the other riders will know that. When you think that Lamini, even if he finishes second in these two King of the Mountains or King of the Hills, he'll still take that jersey, so that's what he's got in his mind. Tom Moses for JLT Condor, well, it looks as if he's got himself in the breakaway. He's taken points in both competitions, but it's possibly not enough for him today. And will we see him, trying to kind of sneak away? It's going to be very difficult, because I think he'll be tracked by many of the other riders. But you can just see that all these 6 riders have kind of kicked back a little bit the pace. They're just going through the motions, doing their turn. The peloton are struggling to keep them just at the same time gap.
They don't want to bring them back too quickly, do they?
It's going down.
They'll be responding to each other, won't they? So
yes.
Of course there'll be riders in this break, as you've described before, who are keen on making sure they're fresh for the last intermediate sprint, but more significantly and more importantly, the two King of the Mountains. That will affect the pace, and the bunch will be aware. They certainly won't want to bring these riders back too much, because the situation on the road for the sprint teams and for the team of the leader of the race, Pat Bevan, is absolutely perfect. They're in complete control, no threat for the GC. The sprinters teams have a lot of might. I'm assuming that it won't be too difficult for them to bring this back in the finale. So, but by the same token, they don't want to close up too quickly and reopen the race with 50 k's to go in 2 climbs, because that's when riders just behind Pat Bevan on the general classification might actually use those 2 climbs as a possible catapult to try and rattle BMC. But the situation on the road is perfect. But it's a delicately balanced situation, isn't it? The riders in front making sure they're doing enough to stay clear, but not too much, because I think all of these riders know, with a gap at only 1 minute and 36 seconds, that it's about staying out in front as long as they can, unless they're feeling super strong. They know their chances of staying away are limited, so the focus is on making sure they stay away and battle it out for these for the points in the mountains, and then just basically take it from there. So there's almost like 2 finish lines here, isn't it, for the breakaway?
Yeah, you're right. Looking at the King of the Mountains, and all Nick Lamini has to do for Team Dimension Data is follow Moses, so it's going to be very difficult for Moses to go anywhere without Lamini, because that's his job. On the road there are 4 points between Moses, who's in 16 points, and Lamini on 20 points. There's only 4 points between them to see who's going to get the jersey, and I think Moses was really interested in trying to take the jersey today, but it's going to be very difficult. If he tries to surprise, Lamini will be all over him. So it's going to be very difficult for Moses to take this jersey today. But I'm just thinking Ursuline, maybe Peyton, maybe over the top of the second climb, might decide to go for a long one.
Well, 6 k's to go to the next climb of the day, the climb of Edge Hill. Gave its name actually to the first battle of the English Civil War. Welcome back to stage 4 of the OVO Tour of Britain, Nuneaton to Royal Leamington Spa. 183 k's, 114 miles. The distance, 52.3 of those still to go. We're now weaving our way north. We've still got 2 categorised climbs to go. In about 5 k's time, we'll be on the foot slopes of Edge Hill. Short but steep, only 800 metres long, 9.9% average. More points on offer for the King of the Mountains classification, which could change hands yet again today. Nick Lamini poised to take over that jersey, but a real battle for the points. Tom Moses desperately wanting to claw his way back up the classification of the KOM. And also Another rider rubbing shoulders with them is Matt Holmes of Madison Genesis. Has dominated proceedings so far from the breakaway. Took the first hotspot sprint in Kenilworth. That was quite a long time ago now, about 50 k's back. He also took the second sprint in Wellesbourne, and then he took the first King of the Mountains of the day in Ilmington. So Matt Holmes looking very, very sharp indeed. I must admit he did look very, very strong yesterday when the racing was on. He was able to mix it with the likes of Andre Greipel, etc. Faded a little bit towards the finish, but clearly very aggressive. And I think that's the tactic of the Madison Genesis team, although they do have, well, they had a particularly good finish yesterday, courtesy of the national champion, Connor Swift. He finished a very fine 6th place yesterday. I've been impressed with the way Connor Swift has ridden this year in particular. He's really come up, burst onto the scene, winning a couple of rounds of the Tour Series.
Just gives you an indication of the confidence you get from winning one race. And no, it's
definitely
just not one race, but the national championship. Having that jersey on, riding your home national tour, and you know, the confidence you get in that, and you can see it in the way he's riding. And it's not just the way he's riding; it's the intelligence he's using as well. He's not kind of wasting energy. He's coming up at the right time. He's doing a lot of things right at the moment, and it's just a big learning curve for him, and he's certainly doing a very good job.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. He's got a brand new bespoke Genesis bike in rather nice sort of paint splatter colours of British Champion, and he's got the word Swifty on his top tube. But
hasn't that been taken yet?
It has been taken by Ben Swift. Now Swifty did go on Ben Swift went on Twitter to say it should be Swifty Junior. So it was quite interesting seeing that. But now looking at the BMC team car and the yellow 16 jersey, that's significant race wins, World Championships. But the yellow BMC jersey there was Cadel Evans' victory in the Tour de France a few years back, of course. So many of the teams using the team buses and the cars to illustrate the Palmares. Chris Froome doing the same on his Pellerello F10, so we get a close look of Chris Froome's bike. And that's one of the wonderful things about the accessibility of bike races. You can go to the start and the finish area, get up close to the team cars, the team buses, chat to the riders, get autographs, selfies, get a close look at the bikes, and you'll see quite a few custom bikes out there, and many of the riders now putting the most significant victories on the bikes.
Custom paintworks you're talking about,
yeah, custom paint
because
jobs.
all bikes are made pretty much from molds now.
Yeah,
so
it's the same frame, but we have the custom paint jobs I'm talking about. There are very few riders now. You're quite right, Brian. It's interesting who actually get bespoke bikes.
You can actually buy the same bikes.
Yeah, they're off the peg. Most of these frames are off the peg. You do hear, without speaking about any companies in particular, different carbon fibre layouts. The vast majority, well, actually exclusively in the peloton in this race, as far as I'm aware, they're all going to be carbon bikes, including Madison Genesis. They were a company who rode on steel bikes for a couple of years, but I think they're back on carbon now. But yeah, as you said, Brian, and that's, you can buy all these bikes. You can go online, go to a bike shop, and get these bikes off the peg, and then all the micro adjustments are basically done by saddle position, handlebar reach, etc., etc. But you'll notice very extreme positions for these riders, very low at the front, and a big differential between the height of their saddle and the handlebar height, which you'll find is very different for all-purpose riders or people riding sportifs. It's a very, very particular aero position, which isn't great on the back if you're new to the sport. So don't attempt to adopt any of these rather aggressive-looking positions. Classic one there for Patton, a tall rider, but very low at the front. A little bit more of a traditional setup for the rider in position 3 there, Orslin, a little bit higher at the front, more of an old-school setup, but increasingly now riders getting very aero at the front, because basically getting yourself aerodynamic, apart from getting yourself fit, getting the aerodynamics right is crucially important now. And there's more and more research being done as that year on year, riders going into wind tunnels with the clothing, bike setup. But the biggest thing you can affect on the bike in terms of your speed, Brian, apart from getting fitter, is making sure your body's in a good position on the bike.
Yeah, things change, and the one change that I couldn't really get my head round or use was, I like my handlebars pretty much flat. The bottom of my bars was pretty much level with my top tube, not a sloping top tube, but you know, the level top tube, maybe slightly inclined. My brake levers were pretty much level. That's the way I used to like to ride, especially when it came to the climbs. When you get out the saddle, it was easier, but a lot of riders now having their brake levers quite high up, and okay, riding on the flat and riding maybe into the wind and things like that, it seems very comfortable. But when you get out the saddle, they're kind of higher. So that's something that is been used by a lot of riders over the last period of time that I haven't done myself.
Indeed. Well, I must admit, as I've got a little bit older, the back's not quite what it was, so I think I've got a little bit of a higher position at the front than I used to back in the olden days, Brian. But here we are on Edge Hill, climb number 2 of the day. As we look back to the peloton, Pat Bevan in green. Quite a low style actually, Pat Bevan, but a very, very good all-rounder. I think a really underrated rider, but you look back at his results, very, very consistent in getting his just rewards at the moment. Second place yesterday, taking that crucial 6-second time bonus, which has catapulted him into the lead of this race. He's aided by an extremely strong BMC team as well. Stefan Kung, Jempe Drucker, Jürgen Rollens, young Miles Scottson and TJ Van Garderen. That really is a lineup to savour. But Pat Bevan looking very, very good. And this is a bit of road that you and I will both recognise, Brian. The lower slopes of Edge Hill. And it did give its name, as I mentioned just before the break, the first battle of the English Civil War. There's going to be a little bit of a battle here, because this is where the road starts to rise, starts to kick up. So the last 400 metres, pretty brutal here, Brian, aren't they? Yeah,
it's tough. You can't really see it on the TV, but you know, this is a tough, kind of steep little climb. You know, at the top when your legs are your legs are really sore and you're in oxygen debt, especially if you race up it, and that's what the rider's going to do now. You've got Matt Holmes on the left, Lamini there. Looks like Tom Moses is kind of struggling a little bit, but I'm sure that he'll give 100% to try and get as many points as possible at the top of this climb.
He certainly will. Well, Holmes looking to wind this up on the top. So look at this style here of Nick Lamini, almost Marco Pantani style, her hands on the drops, looking around, giving himself a little bit of space, riding pretty wisely at the moment. Got the measure of everybody else so far. The rider just dropping back a little bit that has got a good kick is Tom Moses, but winding a big gear at the moment is Matt Holmes, perhaps using a different bit of a style. It looks like Moses, to me, is struggling just a little bit. He's definitely dropping off the back, so I don't think Moses will be figuring. A good tactic here by Holmes to keep the pace very, very high. Sat down. Lamini still with that rather unorthodox climbing style, but we know what a punch he's got, and Orslin for the first time in the mix here too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what Orslin is doing here. He's just following the riders in front. We may see this group of 6 split up. Possibly Lamini, if he does take points at the top, maximum points, they may decide to push on a little bit. But we've got Matt Holmes on the left hand side from Madison Genesis pushing on a little bit now. Lamini, he's just possibly interested in taking second over the top of this climb to make sure. He's just looking around to see where Tom Moses is. Tom Moses doesn't have the legs, and Matt Holmes is going to make a 100% record today in both competitions.
He certainly is. Matt Holmes, 100% as you said, Brian, rounds the corner, takes the points at the top of the Skoda, King of the Mountains. Maximum points for him. So another 8 points in the bag, giving him a total now of 16 points. If we just pan back a little bit. Big smile there from Matt Holmes. He would have gone pretty deep there, but he imposed himself on the climb. And I think that was pretty shrewd riding there by Lamini, because Holmes up until today hadn't scored at all. Lamini didn't really need to bother about the 1 point difference there at all. Just held on for second place, riding within himself, and then he can contribute to the pacemaking after this climb to make sure that he scores again on the next climb to move himself into the lead. So Skoda KOM at number 2 is done. Next up on the menu for the climbers is Burton Dassett, and that only comes in about 10 kilometres time. So the Battle of Edge Hill has been done and dusted for the front of the group. Well, the battle many years ago in 1642 was actually fought on a Sunday, 23rd of October. It was the first major battle in the English Civil War between the Royalists of King Charles I and the Parliamentarian army commanded by the Earl of Essex, for those historians amongst you. So a very historic place indeed. Lots of battlefields around this area. Robert Power on the left-hand side, still winding that big gear up. Just moving up on the outside. Looks like it says Stephen Williams moving up the outside for Great Britain there. The GB team have been in the mix exceptionally well over the last couple of days. And when I say the GB team, I also include the Wiggins team, because they're almost like a mix and match team. The Wiggins team, of course, their own continental team, that many of those riders regularly represent Great Britain. But I've been impressed by the strength here. This looks like Inkhorn now just moving up. Probably going for a bead on the left-hand side. There are a few soigneurs just at the side of the road here. And there he is. Rather than go for the points, he takes his bead on and then swings off. So the last few points, there's 2 and 1 points on offer. The first 8 over a second category climb are awarded points. 8 for first, down to 1 point for 8th position. And the finish line of a race that I did was actually just at that finishing point. As I say, it was. I don't think the race exists anymore, sadly. But a good race. Graham Briggs just on the back there, pedaling that little gear. Bit of a clunked gear change there from Briggsy. A nice little bit of sportsmanship there as well. That was from Roger Kluger. That's always nice to see there, Brian, isn't it? You know, it's you'd often will help unless it's a really critical point in the race and you're on the rivet. There's no harm at all in giving a bit of a rider a push, because it's something that you'd like to receive if you had a problem yourself. So it is really, it's quite nice to see. Yeah,
natural reaction there. Most riders would have done that as well. But Nick Lamini finishing second over Edgehill now takes the virtual leader, leading the competition now, the Skoda King of the Mountains. Matt Holmes adds to his tally, so he's at 16 points. Moses, he did feature, just have to kind of wait and see where he actually finished in there. He started the climb on 16 points. You see Graham Briggs still get that problem. He'll get service, but now Lamini is on 27 points. Scott Davis, who hasn't scored today, or his teammate on 26. So the virtual leader will be Lamini, and you would think that they're going to stay away. He's going to take some more points. Matt Holmes looks as if he could make this a 100% day for him. I just thought for a second there that they might kind of decide to push on a little bit, because Ursuline, he's not interested in King of the Mountains, he's not interested in sprints. He is interested in trying to go the whole way today, and obviously riding at a different level from the rest of the riders. It's you know, Pro Continental, so they are pushing on a little bit, but with the gap of 1 minute 39 with 45 kilometers to go, it's going to be a tough ask. I think Delamini just wants to take some more points in the next climb, with Matt Holmes wants to take another maximum.
Indeed, well, Matt Holmes clearly looks the strongest. He's shown a clean pair of heels in both of the opening intermediate sprints, the iceberg sprints, and the first 2 climbs as well. We have 1 more climb to go, and that's in about 8 kilometers time, the climb of Burton Dassett. A different climb, nowhere near as steep, but doubly as long, 1.7 k's in distance, the average gradient of 4.9%, and that comes at just under 145 k's, 90 miles. As you look at one of the other local churches, looks like that's undergoing some renovation at the moment, but this really is a beautiful part of the world. When I was a lot younger, at the back end of the 1980s, to come out into Warwickshire on our annual Hemel Hempstead Youth Hostel tour over 3 days. Very, very fond memories indeed, including crashing into a Ford in almost sub-zero temperatures, and they're being soaking wet for the last 30 miles of the ride. But some good memories. I mean,
I thought you were talking about a car there.
No, not crashing. Very, yeah, thank you. That was a rather ambiguous statement. It wasn't a Ford car; it was a Ford. Thankfully, none of the riders here will be going through any Fords, but it was very slippery. I just took it at too much pace. It was very mossy, and down I went, and I was rather smelly as well. 43.2 k's to go now, 1 minute and 35. There's still the peloton being led by Ilio Kaiser on the front there in the blue for Quick Step Floors. What a season Quick Step Floors have had. You may think I'm repeating myself, but we do need to say it's 60 wins for the mighty Belgian team now. Kaiser leads with 59 wins after Alaphilippe crossed the line in first position in Bristol. Looked absolutely delighted, wonderfully set up by his team. An interesting day when you look at the way Quick Step Floors rode yesterday. I think it's illustrative of the confidence they've got. They've only got 6 riders here, and this is, I think, without a shadow of a doubt, the best field ever assembled for the Tour of Britain. This is the 15th edition in its current iteration. But Quick Step Floors are almost riding now with, they're entertaining us, aren't they? There's a flamboyance and a confidence about the team, which only must come when you've got 40 or 50 wins. Because if they didn't win another race this year, would it really matter? They can just have fun. But when you've got that much strength in the team, that much confidence, you're on this ridiculous crest of a wave, almost euphoric crest of a wave. I mean, it is quite wonderful to see. It makes for exciting racing, but you know, we saw Gaviria on the attack, one of the first riders to attack tomorrow. Ilio Kaiser was trying to get into moves, Youngles, and then none of that succeeded, but they still had the strength to bring it together for Alaphilippe, who delivered at the finale. It was really something to watch, wasn't it? I mean, the fans at home and at the side of the road have been treated to something spectacular from Quick Step Floors this year, aren't they?
Exceptional team, exceptional year they've had, and they took it on and they won the stage. It's never always guaranteed, especially with some of the talent we've got here at the Tour of Britain, as you've already said, Matt. But I think this year in the Giro d'Italia, a team missing out on a breakaway, they were taking it up, they were always taking it up, they were always looking for the stage win, and sometimes you don't always get that. The breakaway had gone, Quick-Step Floors had missed out, but they took it up early. They decided they wanted to go for the stage win. We made comment on it at the time that first and foremost, win the stage and then take anything else with it. We just have to wait and see. It's a long enough race. You can make up some seconds here and there, but to guarantee the stage. And Alaphilippe is the normal kind of attacking rider. And we saw Gaviria have a go in the final climb before Bristol, but Alaphilippe never done anything. In the first stage, Alaphilippe was attacking. So they decided that Alaphilippe was their man and he was going to wait for the final sprint. Gaviria maybe should have look at his road book and decided that that climb was a bit longer than he possibly thought about it, because if Modulo was there and Caleb Ewan was there, then I think Gaviria could have been there, so they could have another option there, but we'll wait and see that. But I've just noticed that in front of the peloton now, with just outside 40 kilometres to go, that either Modulo feels okay or Dan McClay feels okay.
One of the two.
Education first have now put a rider on the front.
They certainly have. EF Education first. Going to be very shortly, from what we can see, assisting with the pacemaking. And it looked as if it was Jose Fernandez actually just moving up, slot himself into the line there. Matty Breschel, Dan McClay, Hugh Carthy, he certainly won't do any riding. He sits highly on the GC, the best placed British rider from Lancashire, 9th overall at the present time, 19 seconds behind the race leader Patrick Bevin. And there is the site of the peloton, a classic arrowhead formation. Moving along at a pace now, just over 40 kilometres to go, but the bunch happy, I think, still with the situation on the road. They certainly won't want to close this down just yet, but always nice to have a fresh pair of legs coming through. And generally speaking, the teams wishing to take things up the front and participate in the sprint always generally put a rider at the front. It's just a mark of, it's kind of respectful, isn't it, as well? It's just saying we've got a sprinter here, we're going to assist with the pacemaking, and that just makes things just a little bit easier in the finale. As you see the side of Pat Bevin, the OVO Energy race leader in green, was blending in with the Warwickshire foliage around him. Just over 40 k's to go of stage 4 of the Tour of Britain. We started off in Nuneaton about 11:15 this morning. We are heading to Royal Leamington Spa after a rather lovely jaunt through the Warwickshire countryside. We've had 2 hotspot sprints already. We've had 2 climbs, every single one of those won by the rider in the breakaway, which I've no doubt we'll see very, very shortly. That is Matthew Holmes, 24 years of age for Madison Genesis, and he's the best placed rider. And right on cue, back with the breakaway. So Matt Holmes dominated the proceedings so far today. He's moved up in the sprints classification. If he takes the final sprint, as Brian alluded to earlier on, he will go equal on points to the leader of that classification, Matthew Teggart of Ireland of Team Wiggins. And looking at the gap at the moment, 1 minute and 33 seconds, still under 40 k's to go. The top of the climb, the next climb coming very shortly, and a very rapid drop-off as we look at the confirmation on Edgehill. Matt Holmes maxes on 8 points. Nick Dlamini's second place and 7 points now moves him into the lead of the King of the Mountains, ahead of his teammate Scott Davis by 1 solitary point. Paul Orslin is third. Hayden McCormack, Patton, Moses Stedman and Rob Power of Mitchelton Scott taking the last point on that second category climb of Edgehill. And only about 4 k's now to the next climb of Burton Dassett, and the breakaway should be on the foot slopes, in fact, very, very shortly, because it's a slightly longer climb, 1,700 metres, so just over a mile, 4.9%. A gradual start, then a bit of a kick up, a plateau, and then a drag up. But the way Matt Holmes is riding, Brian, I can't see him really being beaten, and I think Dlamini would be happy with second place as well, because Dlamini now, they've clearly got a planned dimension data. They've got an insurance policy in the form of Scott Davis, but the way Dlamini has been riding very sharply, but also in quite a composed fashion, not unnecessarily expending energy. When there's clearly somebody stronger than you, you might as well say, hey, there's no point in me digging a hole for myself. I'm secure in second. All I need to do is roll over the line and score those points and play a slightly longer game.
For sure, that's the plan of the rider with number 13 in his back, Nick Dlamini, the South African, and Tom Moses only adds 3 points. That's the rider he's most worried about, and now sits with 19 points compared to 27 from Dlamini. So 8 points of a difference. When we went into Edge Hill, there was 4 points of a difference, so he's kind of doubled his lead compared to Moses now, so kind of stretched that one out. And you can only think in that last climb, Moses, the rider at the back, number 53, was really struggling on that climb, and I can't think that on this next climb that he'll be gaining any more points than he did in the previous climb. So Dlamini already in that competition lead. Matt Holmes looking good. Matt Holmes, if he takes maximum points, will go to 24 points, which will be, if Dlamini takes seconds, 10 points behind Dlamini. Nice advantage to have, but Matt Holmes looking good, that if he gets on a breakaway in another day that Dlamini doesn't get in, then we could have a bit of a battle. But Matt Holmes, I think, will want to try and take this final sprint. If he does, then he'll go into the lead in that competition. So Madison Genesis is having a good day out so far, but so is Team Dimension Data.
They certainly have, and the gap has come down a little bit. I think the pace in the peloton has remained constant, the same sort of effort being put out. And now they are on the foot slopes of this climb. The climb of Burton Dassett. It's actually the home of Burton Dassett Country Park. There's 100 acres of historical interest, and one of the highest points on today's stage. Amazing views of the surrounding hills. Lots of other notable landmarks as described as well. And at the site, the top of here, there is actually a 12th century holy well, which still provides water. And some of the riders might need a little bit of water or something else at the top of this climb, because Alex Patton just starting to struggle. I also think quite clearly Tom Moses losing the wheel there. He struggled on the last one. That's why he hasn't been doing too much riding now. I think for Tom Moses, with the greatest of respect, he's just going to try and hang on in this group as long as he can. Maybe gild himself for the final hotspot sprint. The question now is Ursuline. We're not too far away from the top, but Ursuline is going with these riders. He'll be thinking that he doesn't want to take any passengers, that he may want to try and go long on this over the top of this climb, because for the moment, if it does take passengers, it does regroup, then he's got some dead wood that isn't going to help. Well, this is where it just kicks up a little bit, and then they've got a bit of a plateau, almost descends very briefly before kicking back up again. So climb of two distinct halves, the long gradual incline to the kick up. And they should have a little bit of a cross tailwind on this part of the climb. So Ursuline happy to take things up at the moment. An ideal situation for the rider just sat in second position. The virtual leader of the King of the Mountains now. This is that little drop before it kicks up again. Not particularly steep at the top. So almost like a more of a hotspot sprint than a climb. 1 minute and 12 seconds. Let's just have a little look at who takes things up. Dlamini just constantly checking around. He knows he's going to score a lot of points. Oof. Matt Holmes not taking any prisoners at all, maxing out again, no doubt about that. Nearly collected a spectator on the way, and Dlamini was pretty happy with that as well. He knows that Holmes is just that little bit sharper, but he has a nice cushion, so secures second place there. McCormack in third, and the next set of points taken by Paul Ursuline. So great riding there by Matthew Holmes, exceptionally strong today. Let's have a look at that again in slow motion. Nearly wipes out, but again, sportsmanlike behaviour there from over the cattle grid from Dlamini. Just lets him slide by. But he's spending a lot of energy, a real punch there, but making no doubt, and a very good day in the saddle for Matt Holmes. Well, he's not taking any chances. He's going for everything. So his points tally goes up to 24. And Dlamini just increases his lead in that competition, so he'll have a 10-point advantage over Matt Holmes. But situation now is we've got another team interested in trying to bring this breakaway back, and
I'm not too sure if both Patton and Moses will get back on, because Ursuline seems to be interested in kind of pressing on a little bit. But what we're seeing now is Caleb Ewan in a bit of trouble at the back of this group. He's got his teammates round about him. So Caleb Ewan had a good day yesterday. He came up a little bit short in the sprint. Okay, it was an uphill sprint, but he really tried hard yesterday. He was 2 to 4, and looks like he's in trouble in this climb.
Well, real pace being said about the front here. This is Jose Fernandez, and maybe the instruction was just to make it a little bit difficult for some of the sprinters in, maybe try and dislodge Caleb Ewan, because Sasha Modolo can get over these climbs a little bit better than Caleb Ewan, although Caleb Ewan was riding exceptionally strongly yesterday. So yes, he's clearly just not having a great day, but I think he's got 4 teammates around him. There's a long plunge off the top, no real great difficulties at all in terms of the terrain. Even if they lose 20-30 seconds over the back of this climb, looking at the way the other teams aren't really particularly rolling through quickly, I'd imagine that Caleb Ewan will get back on. He doesn't need to panic. He's been in this situation time and time again in the past, and sprinters have to get used to that as well, don't they? They clearly really have to measure their effort. They can't get over all the climbs, and quite often it's a tactic they'll use, because if they put themselves into the red on every single climb, that can damage their effort later on. So quite often it's a good idea just to pull the pin and get your teammates to gradually bring you back up in a real linear fashion, rather than having to apply too much pressure on the pedals and dig into your reserve. So quite often it is a tactic for the sprinters to get dropped, and then have the team around them get back in the convoy and get back in contact.
Yes, but I think the information will get to the riders in front, and possibly Fernandez, for education first, will maybe try a little bit harder, knowing that Caleb Ewan has been distanced a little bit. Make the efforts to get him back somewhat more difficult. You can just see over the top of the climb, it's still fairly lined out. I wouldn't say it was full gas, but if you know that a sprinter, one of the favourites for today's stage, is in a little bit of difficulty, you want to kind of push on a little bit, keep the tempo high, make it as difficult as possible for them to come back to the front. But Mitchelton Scott were riding on the front, so it would have been on the authority that Caleb Ewan was feeling okay, because normally if your sprinter doesn't feel that good, you don't put a rider on the front, or you put a rider on the front without even asking them, because you want to put the pressure on. But some riders were distanced there. They will get back on, and an intelligent move here from Lamini.
Dropping
now
back, isn't he? Yeah, I think he's dropped back here. There is no point at all in Lamini now pressing on. He needs to recover, because without trying to predict too much, this breakaway, unless something rather abnormal happens, should get brought back by the peloton. His job is done today. Secured the King of the Mountains jersey for another day, taking it from the shoulders of his teammate Scott Davis. So good day, and now an opportunity to rest up for a minute or so, get caught by the bunch, and sit in and recover for another day. Welcome back. Just over 30 kilometres to go now on this stage 4 of the OVO Tour of Britain, Nuneaton to Royal Leamington Spa. It's just at the back of the bunch there. And there's number 1 with 12, that's Richard Handley, and he has a teammate in the front who has dominated the day so far from the breakaway. As we just look at Karen Bowman, victim of a crash the other day. I think it was on stage 1 that Bowman came down, the young Dutchman, an exceptionally good climber. As a Mobistar, with the white M's just move up the outside. The Spanish team, the Katusha in the centre there, the clutch of red. Bardiani on the right hand side in that lime green, white and orange kit. As we said, that colour blocking. And just at the back there, the assembled ranks of Mitchelton Scott in the primarily black kit this year, with the yellow shoulders. And we can say that Caleb Ewan is back in the fold after briefly being dropped on the final climb of the day of Burton Dassett. No real problems. He certainly did press on the front. A little bit of an acceleration by EF Education first. Jose Fernandez probably instructed to, as you said, Brian, make things a little bit difficult. That's often the kind of tactic, probably knowing that over the top they'll get back on. But it's important, isn't it, to try and make things difficult for the sprinters when you can, especially when you've got a protected sprinter yourself who's a bit more of an all-rounder. As we look at the confirmation of the final climb of the day, Burton Dassett, Matthew Holmes takes maximum points yet again. Nick Dlamini, another 7 points in the bag for him, increasing his lead in that classification. He'll be on the podium later on today. Eddie McCormack third, Orslin, Patton, Moses, Jose Fernandez and Jens Kukalera scoring the final point for Lotto Soudal there. So nice comfortable lead for Nick Dlamini. and an added bit of tempo here on the front. Just a body language now, just the speed they're moving at. The peloton rushing along pretty briskly, should I say. I don't think the bunch will catch the breakaway before the next intermediate sprint. That comes at Southam at just over 160 k's. But the bunch now moving along at a fair rate of knots, and clearly eager now to try and make sure this does stay all together and ultimately come down to a big bunch sprint run.
Yeah, they've been consistent, the peloton, riding at a good tempo, and that's what you find nowadays, that they ride at tempo. The breakaway gap coming down a little bit over the top of the final climb there, with the points taken by Lamini, means that he has got a good lead in that competition over his teammates. His teammate Scott Davis still sits in second place at 26 points. Lamini gets 34 points. But moving into third place in that competition, courtesy of winning all three climbs today, is Matt Holmes, who's on 24 points. And Tom Mosey's on 22 points now. So Lamini has a healthy enough lead on his teammate Scott Davis in that competition. Now we start to look at the final sprint of the day. That comes with 22.6 kilometres to the sprint, that point. Matt Holmes in front for Madison Genesis. If he does take that, then he'll become the new leader of the sprints competition.
And that's why I think he's so eager to press on at the front. I wonder how much he will have in his legs though, because they've got one rider less now. Lamini has dropped back. The gap is at 1 minute and 13 seconds. We hit the final sprint of the day at Southam. That comes with 22.6 kilometres to go. So only about 6 kilometres to that sprint. With a gap of a minute, there shouldn't be too many problems for the breakaway to hold on to at least that point and possibly another few kilometres beyond. But you can just sense that there's some real urgency now in the bunch. Lotto Soudal now assisting with the pacemaking on the front, lifting the tempo, drawing these riders in so they can impose themselves on the race.
But saying that, Matt, there's an opportunity here. Okay, it's a minute, but you can shut this gap down very quickly, and I've seen it in other events, but I think the opportunity's gone now. But if Team Wiggins went onto the front and drilled it, they could possibly bring that back and they could keep a hold of that jersey. But I think
it's a bit late now with only 6 k's. It's going to be tight, isn't it?
It's the option there with a couple of kilometres to go over the top of the climb. If Wiggins had gone in front, then they had every opportunity of bringing this break back and having a shot at this. But I think the opportunity is gone. If they were going to do it, it would have been over the top of the climb. But I also noticed that with the Mitchelton Scott now bringing their sprinter back, they won't get involved with the chase now. They save their energy and try and position Caleb Ewan in a good position in the final corner. With 300 metres to go, but it doesn't look good for the small Aussie sprinter. But also in that group with Caleb Ewan was Phil Bauhaus. Phil Bauhaus hasn't been riding too well. He's another good sprinter, already losing quite considerable amount of time, just over 20 minutes. So there's a few riders that are here, maybe not shining bright as they have done in many other races, but good to see them here anyway.
Well, that's the thing with some of the sprinters, you can never really predict how they're necessarily going. Even on a bad day, sometimes a sprinter can just turn it on for 250 metres at the end of a race. If they're looked after, they can just really turn it on.
You can go through a bad patch in races.
Exactly. You can have a couple of bad stages, and also the last couple of stages haven't certainly been suited to the pure sprinters. They've been very, very difficult. Proper GC days, apart from stage 1. And a reminder of the results of stage 1, just so you can start to think about the riders who may figure in the finish here today. With a gap at 1 minute and 12 seconds, still 27 k's to go roughly. Andre Greipel won at stage 1. That was when we finished in Newport, and he took that victory very solidly from a fast finishing Caleb Ewan. Fernando Gaviria third on that occasion. 3 of the finest sprinters of their generation. Gabs Colleague of Team Wiggins was in 4th, a wonderful performance by him. And then the very experienced Jürgen Rollins 5th. Pasqualion of Wanty Group Goubert, another one to watch out for, constantly finishes in the top 10. He was 6th. Ethan Hayter of GB, he was 7th. He was 4th, was 3rd yesterday, Ethan Hayter. Definitely watch out for Ethan Hayter. So very, very good young sprinter. So Hayter was 4th yesterday. And also watch out, there's the Bardiani duo of Simoni and Albanese. But yeah, still a few other sprinters definitely to consider. Phil Bauhaus being one of them. They've lost their other sprinter, Edward Turns, to a crash. So Team Sunweb down to 5 riders. And maybe think about Roman Cardi as well of Direct Energy. the Team EF Education first Drapac duo of Maclay and Modulo. We'll soon see in the final who is the protected leader for that team. It was Modulo yesterday, but Rick Zabel maybe from Katusha, Kelly Buin of course, Andre Greipel, and maybe one from BMC as well. Pat Bevan himself can sprint quite well. I don't think on a completely flat finish like this it'll be suited. It'd be more maybe for Jempi Drucker or Jürgen Rollins, depending. And maybe think about Pascal Inkhorn as well from Lotto and El Yombo in the yellow and black. So lots of names to conjure with. And quite often the British teams figure in these finishes as well. Should be quite chaotic, especially coming into the last 350 metres. As we look at the figure of Elio Kaiser, very, very stylish indeed. Elbows, arms at 90 degrees on the hoods, those lifted, turned up hoods as you were saying earlier on. But cutting through the air beautifully, stringing this bunch along. And fair play to the breakaway, holding steady at just under 1 minute and 15 seconds now. 25 kilometres to go of stage 4. We're heading to Royal Leamington Spa, and the break that has dominated the day so far still out in front with a lead of 1 minute and 13 seconds, just under 25 kilometres to go before we hit the finishing line. The breakaway consists now of Tom Moses of GLT Condor, Hayden McCormack of One Pro Cycling, Paul Orselin of Direct Energy, Matthew Holmes is there of Madison Genesis, who's taken every single climb today and all of the hotspot sprints so far. And also in the mix for Canyon Iceberg in the blue is Alex Patton. Nick Lamini of Dimension Data has dropped back from the breakaway after scoring enough points to secure the lead for the second time in this race in the King of the Mountains jersey. He'll take that from the shoulders of his teammate Scott Davis, holding steady now 1 minute and 12. Things are starting to get tense now. This will be, Brian, where riders are starting to talk to each other, make sure that their protected leader for the sprint is in good shape, because of course plans that you have at the start of the day, given the fact they've been in the saddle for 4.5 hours, can always change, can't they? And that's why communication within the team is so important. You know, because the last thing you want to do is set up a sprint for a rider who's not capable of doing it. So the riders will be in constant communication with each other, depending on how they're feeling.
Yeah, you have to think what Mitchelton and Scott are going to do now. Caleb Ewan just sitting down the back with some of his teammates still. Confidence can't be that high, but like you say, you can feel rubbish pretty much all day as a sprinter, and then sprint well at the finish. You just come good. Once you get into the flow, it's hard enough sitting in the peloton not feeling good, and you feel it. But once the race starts, once you see the boards coming with 25 kilometers to go, 20 to go, and you get that kind of adrenaline rush, the team bring you towards the front and you start to feel better. So I think it's the job of the sports director now to kind of G up the team, to start reminding the riders of the plan that they had this morning, and stick with the plan and move with the plan. But next thing up is the final sprint of the day in Southam, and you would think that Matt Holmes would be really the motivated person to try and take maximum points here.
He certainly would. Well, these are the 5 surviving members of the breakaway. As I mentioned before, Lamini of Dimension Data now back safely in the bunch, but the sprint coming up very, very shortly, under 1 kilometre to go. I think we've already passed through the 1k to go board before the sprint, and the rider with the most to gain, he's in 3rd position at the moment. Matthew Holmes took the first 2 sprints of the day, all 3 climbs, but I think he's going to be pushed hard, in particular by Alex Patton, who is very, very quick indeed. Everybody else is going to want to take something, but Holmes goes. Big acceleration there from Matt Holmes. No doubt about who is going to score maximum points. He is on a roll, is young Matthew Holmes, 24 from Madison Genesis. What a day in the saddle for Matt Holmes. That'll mean, as long as he stays in the bunch, if they get caught, he will go into the new lead of the Iceberg Sprints competition. Big, big day out for Matthew Holmes. I don't think I've ever seen a rider take every single KOM in every single sprint, because they were hard fought for. Fair play, a big doff of the cap for that rider in front. Basically, the job is now done, isn't it, for him?
Yes, indeed. The gap now just over 1 minute, so good job to Matt Holmes and Madison Genesis. So here we go again. You could see the commitment, and we've seen that all day. He's just taken absolutely no chances. Big commitment. He wants maximum points, and he's taken them in both competitions. the decision will be what he does now. Does he concentrate on the sprints? Does he concentrate on the King of the Mountains? Because sometimes when you've got a kind of dual goal,
it's hard, isn't it, to do both?
It's very difficult to do both. I know people have done it in the past, but unless you have a bit of luck in getting the right breakaways with the right riders, then it's very tough. So they might decide that maybe, obviously, team time trial tomorrow, and then we move on to the next stage. Then Matt Holmes will have to decide, because, like we say, very difficult to look at both.
Indeed. Well, he's got 2 days guaranteed wearing the jersey. Of course, he'll wear it tomorrow for the team time trial. That classification will not change, so a minimum of 2 days in the jersey. Great for the team, as we just see Hugh Carthy, 9th overall, best placed British rider at the moment. It's his teammate on the front at the moment, Jose Fernandez.
He's on bottle duties at the moment, so he's just going up and giving his teammate a bottle, and he's got one in his hand. So I think looking at this, when you get a small team, all the other riders are looking after Modulo and Maclay for this sprint finish. They've got Fernandez on the front, so when you've got a GC contender maybe not suited to helping out in the run in towards the finish, then we've already seen it today with Chris Froome dropping back for bottles. Hugh Carthy is just doing his job for the team today. Yeah,
and he won't. They won't lose anything by doing that at all. As you say, he's not built for the pure lead-outs. He can certainly ride on the front for a long time, but towards the sharp end of this, when the speeds get really high, he's not built for that sort of effort. So, as you quite rightly said, Brian, being generous, he is the team leader for the GC. As we just look at the confirmation of the sprint in Southam, Holmes takes maximum points and moves himself into the lead in that classification, although he will be equal on points with Matt Teggett of Wiggins by virtue of his higher placing on the general classification. He will wear that jersey on tomorrow's stage. They're still out in front, still holding a lead of a minute as we move out of Southam, which, interestingly, Brian, a little bit of a fact here which I didn't know about. Southam is famous for the minting of its own currency called Southam tokens, which came about because the locals found the regular English currency too high in value for everyday use. How interesting is that? And today you can visit the old Mint Public House on Coventry Street. These riders didn't have time for that, sadly, but I love these little nuggets, these little facts. They couldn't be bothered with pounds, shilling and pence, so do you know what? We're a bit skint.
We use mints.
So we'll have our own, yeah, they probably were mints. You could eat them, but that isn't confirmed. Check out the museum to get the facts, basically. But yeah, interesting stuff from Southam.
Glad you're doing your homework.
No, thanks very much indeed. It's all up here, mate. It's all up here. Great facts. 56 seconds now for our leaders. 20 kilometres to go to the finish in Royal Leamington Spa. The day today, the proceedings today, being dominated by the men out in front. Tom Moses of GLT Condor just taking his position at the back of the group. Looks to be one of the riders that's really starting to struggle now, Brian. Not quite as sharp as we're used to seeing. Certainly made efforts on the climbs and the hotspot sprints, but just could not match the sheer power of Matt Holmes. He's on real good form at the moment. There he is, sat in second position. And now, with all the climbs out of the way, all of the hotspot sprints are done and dusted, they're just going to set about trying to ride as long as they can. Of course, there's the Competitivity Award up for grabs, which is another visit to the podium. That in itself is extremely prestigious. But this group, certainly not hanging around. They certainly aren't waving the white flag just yet. As we see some more wonderful crowds on the side of the road. Sun now has come out to greet the riders as we head ever northwards. But no, they're basically thinking now, Brian, of trying to stay away as long as they can and just making it hard for the bunch behind.
Yes, indeed. They'll just take the turn at the front, swing over, and the other rider will come through. They're fighting a kind of losing battle now because so many of the sprint teams now riding on the front of the peloton. Mitchelton Scott are the only team that kind of dropped back a little bit, purely because on the final climb of the day at Burton Dassett that Caleb Ewan was distanced a little bit, so they'll be a little bit concerned. So it'll be about Gene up Caleb Ewan. He did finish second in the first stage. He's very capable of winning this stage, but maybe not feeling too good when you sit in the bunch after a very difficult final yesterday and a very difficult stage for them all yesterday from in Bristol. Then he may not just be feeling that great and deciding to kind of save his legs a little bit, and I'm sure we'll see him up in the final sprint today.
Sunshine now greeting the riders on the run-in to the finish in Royal Leamington Spa. A loop around this gorgeous county, Shakespeare's County. And I wonder what play has been written for the finish today, because the lead now is crumbling for the riders out in front. They went away after about 20 kilometres, a very fast start. But the elastic broke far earlier than it did yesterday. Stayed together for a very, very long time, adding to that very high average speed of the race. But the breakaway have had their day in terms of the intermediate classifications. The hotspot sprints is going to be on the shoulders today of Matthew Holmes. And Nick Dlamini, who's now back in the bunch as far as we are aware, having dropped back from the group, is going to be back in the King of the Mountains classification. So a very fruitful day for our breakaway riders out in front, but they're still riding hard. Hayden McCormack there for New Zealand and One Pro Cycling, the British Continental team, taking his turn. Brave riding here as well. A gritty rider, Tom Moses from Yorkshire, just driving through on the front, despite struggling a little bit on the climbs. Happy to do as much as he can with this group to try and help them stay out in front. The rider now rolling through for France, and direct in LG is Paul Orselin, 24 years of age, without a contract next year, trying to prove himself on the roads of Great Britain. Also there's Alex Patton of Canyon Iceberg, and Matthew Holmes, who again will be on the podium later today in that red jersey. And behind, the long line of the peloton being led by EF Education first. I wonder, Brian, who's it going to be? Will it be McClay? Will it be Modelo? Difficult one to call, isn't it? Modelo appeared yesterday to be the strongest. They're out of the mix completely on stage one. I think Modelo just finished outside the top 10, but it was a very, very technical finish. And again, when you look at the amount of sprinters that are here, even if they're on a good day, all they've got to do is get it wrong on the run-in, and they're completely out of the mix, because there's just not enough space to fit all those riders in. So, you know, teeing up your rider for the final last couple of kilometres is an art form, isn't it?
It is indeed, and looking at you know, the past performances of Dan McClay and Modelo, both of them over the last month or so haven't produced the kind of big results. But you know, looking at the way they're trying to kind of set themselves up, I can only think that they might go with a two-pronged attack here. They might decide that they'll try both scenarios, whether we get McClay kind of freelancing a little bit, because McClay does like to do his own thing. He doesn't always like a lead out.
He's good at that, though. He's good at threading it. He just pulls some unbelievable wins out the bag. I mean, he can thread his way through the peloton like nobody else. I mean, it's quite startling, isn't it? But as you say, quite happy to freelance. But no, it'll be certainly be interesting. But as you say, they've put somebody on the front, and that clearly means they're going to set it up for somebody. But with a small resource, with only 6 riders, one rider we know won't figure, and that'll be this rider in 3rd position now. He's just helping the pacemaking at the front. Also, another rider that we know won't figure is the rider sitting in 9th place overall, Hugh Carthy. He's on bottle duty. So they've basically got 4 riders, 2 of which are protected sprinters. So not a lot of options. So you'd think they'd have to be behind one rider only.
You think so, but maybe in a messy sprint, it's sometimes good to go with 2. I don't always like to go with 2. I think you stick with a plan that we lead out one person and that's it. This is the Tour of Britain. Dan McClay's British and Modelo Italian. You would think they would give the option to Dan McClay, but then again, Dan McClay might not be feeling too good. But the fact that Education First have put a rider on the front says to me that I think Dan is okay, because I think the sports director, I'm not too sure who it is. Is it Charlie here? Charlie,
I'm not too sure. Charlie, yeah, if Charlie's here or not.
I think if Dan McClay's feeling okay.
Tim Kenyak and Tom Southern. Who's just gone through his hometown, in fact.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
Tom and Tim, two Brits. So you think if Dan was okay, they would say, look, we'll look at the option here for Dan. But sometimes you never know how teams work these things out, and we often see that 2 riders from the same team in the top 10, but the fact that they're putting a rider on the front, one of them is feeling good, so we just have to kind of wait and see what one is their chosen one.
Indeed. Well, we'll soon find out, Brian, in about 18-20 minutes time, maybe a little bit less, because they are roaring along now through these lovely roads. Beautiful sunshine now, giving us a lovely view of this quite startlingly beautiful county, should I say. 41 seconds now for our 5 riders out in front, but a very technical last few hundred metres of today's stage. It's a relatively straight run-in through Royal Leamington Spa. 3 kilometres to go. Just after, they'll go through a couple of central islands. There's a lot of road furniture on the run-in, which is I think these riders are relatively used to it, being riding on the roads of England. 2Ks to go, essentially a big straight line. Then in between 2 and 1 kilometre to go in the Flamme Rouge, there are 3 traffic islands. Another big hazard. After 1K to go, another traffic island. And then with about 500 metres to go, there's the final traffic island, and then the 90-degree left-hander. They go over the river as well. Then they swing left into Newbold Terrace for the finish. A very, very short finishing straight. Getting your rider into position into that corner is going to be crucial. I think the first 4 into that corner are the only 4, or maybe 5 riders. They're going to be the ones in for the win. So it's all about that final left-hand bend, isn't it?
I think the key here is to keep the rider safe and in the front. Like you say, from about the 1.5 kilometres to go, that's the key part of making sure that your rider is in position. With these traffic islands or central reservations on the running, it's either going to go to the left or the right hand side, so it's about being safe. And by that time you'd expect the likes of Quick Step Floors to try and get in control, but it's going to be key to be definitely in the top 6 round that final corner for sure. Indeed.
Meanwhile, up in front with a slender lead now, so gradually diminishing, is our breakaway. 36 seconds now with just under 14Ks to go, and it's Hayden McCormack on the offensive for One Pro Cycling. It's a rolling run into the line. It's certainly not flat. The little rollers really starting to sting the legs this deep into the race, and fighting to stay in contact and just getting back into the slipstream of Paul Austin is Alex Patton. Big attack there by the New Zealander. And one rider who has paid the price for his efforts today appears to be Tom Moses. He has now been dispatched from this group, leading 4 riders in front: McCormack, Orslin, Holmes and Patton. Rounding that left-hander. Beautiful autumnal day now. And there it is, there's confirmation. Big day out for Tom Moses, but certainly looked to be not perhaps the best of form. It won't be long before he is taken in by the bunch, and just a short opportunity, Brian, for him to recalibrate, get maybe a gel in, a bit of a drink before getting back to the group. Set out, big ambitions. He found himself in the breakaway with stronger riders, but he might feel better on another day. So the front group of originally 6 now down to 4. You can only think that they're going to battle out the most aggressive rider or more combative rider. But for me, it's nailed on for me. It's Matt Holmes. He does deserve it, doesn't he? But I have a feeling.
But the referees,
politics.
Yeah, the referees don't often give it to someone that's already in the podium. That's the situation. I think in this circumstance they have to, but we'll have to wait and see in confirmation on that. But the most combative rider today, bar none, in the breakaway is Matt Holmes. Yeah, I would agree with you there. But we're not part of the we're not part of the race jury, are we? No, we've got enough to do. Entertaining you folks at home. Well, these are the entertainers out on the road. They've ridden superbly today. Animated this race, as the Italians call them. They're protagonistas. Gone out in front, battled for the points in the King of the Mountains and the Iceberg hotspot sprints. And their efforts today have been rewarded, in particular Nick Dlamini from Dimension Data. He'll be in the Mountains jersey on the podium today. And the wearer of the Iceberg Sprints jersey will be Matt Holmes, taking over from another Matt Teggart. As I say, he's been the rider that's won every single point awarded. It's a big, big ride. And also hats off to Moses, McCormick, Ursula and Orslin too. 36 seconds, 12Ks to go. The irrepressible Ilio Kaiser on the front for Quick Step Floors now. Just how strong is this man? Just behind him, Jens Kukalere of Lotto Soudal. Remember, they've already got a stage win, have Lotto Soudal, by virtue of Andre Greipel's victory on stage 1. Outpowering Fernando Gaviria and Caleb Ewan. Caleb Ewan was distanced on the final climb of the day. He is back in the peloton. I think Mitchelton Scott just, rather than putting riders on the front, making sure they look after him as best they can as we move back to the front in the face of Alex Patton. Multi-disciplined rider, former junior cyclocross champion of Great Britain on the mountain bike Olympic programme as well. Now has switched his focus to the road. Fantastic criterium rider, but has ridden exceptionally well today. The rolling shoulders now and the grimaces, Brian, just illustrating this has been a very, very tough day out. But they will not give up. 30 seconds is not a bad lead to carry into the last 11Ks of this stage.
It's going to be close, it's going to be hard for them, but they will not give up until the very end.
Yeah, like most breakaways, they're putting up a good fight. They're going to the end. Matt Holmes is the only rider that I would think that we'd want to try and save a little bit. You can just see he's sitting on the back. He's just kind of missing turns, which I think for Matt is the best thing to do, because he knows that in the days to come, possibly not tomorrow, but in the days to come, that he'll have to get in the breakaway again. If he's leading the sprints competition and he's up there in the King of the Mountains competition, for sure he's got to look at other days of getting in the breakaway. So it's important for him to try and save as much energy as possible.
Indeed. Again, I think he'll still assist with the pacemaking a bit, but I think he needs to be mindful of what's going to happen in the next few stages, as you quite rightly said, Brian. It's going to be a tough day tomorrow, a short day tomorrow, but team time trials are brutal enough, let alone uphill team time trials. But certainly is going well, still willing to assist. Patton doing a long drag turn on the front hip, rocking and rolling now, really fighting with his machine. And as we pan outwards, it won't be very long before the peloton have this group of 4 in their sights. Tom Moses has now been rejoined by the peloton. Nick Lamini, who was originally in that move, safely back in the bunch, and there they are, the marauding peloton, being led by 3 teams. Quick Step Floors looking after Fernando Gaviria, disappointing on the first stage, mistimed his sprint, and there's an attack by the Frenchman Paul Orselin. Still that combativity award up for grabs. Big attack on the right hand side, and Matt Holmes, well,
he wants it all.
He certainly does. Le Cannibal, Matt Holmes, brings back the Frenchman. McCormack in his slipstream, and now it's Patton starting to struggle. 10Ks to go.
Well, when you're on a good day, you're on a good day, and Matt Holmes is on a good day, and he's certainly put himself about today, taking maximum points in all competitions. So when Ursuling went there, he decided, well, I want part of that as well. McCormack goes with him for One Pro Cycling. Not too sure if the other rider that was there, Alex Payton from Canyon Iceberg, has managed to get up there. So from 6 down to 3 riders now in the front, with a very slender advantage of 25 seconds.
Indeed. Still Lilio Kaiser on the front. Jens Kukalera just sat behind. And the riders of the BMC are moving up. Remember the race leader, Patrick Bevin, after finishing 2nd yesterday. He's in 5th position in that green jersey. So watch out for him. He is a very fast finisher himself, but I think should this all come back together, they have other options in the form of Jempe Drucker and maybe Jürgen Rollins. Jürgen Rollins finished 5th on the opening stage. He used to be the lead-out rider for Andre Greipel. Rode for Lotto Soudal for many years. But he's one of those riders who's extremely good. Well, he's very, very good at leading out, but can kick at the end of a hard stage exceptionally well himself. And Brian, this finale, you talked about the necessity to keep your sprinter, your protected sprinter, at or near the front with about 1,500 to go, maybe even earlier. But what you need as well is the faith of a teammate to take you into that final corner at the right sort of pace, because we've seen these final left-handers, there's a bit of a pinch point before the left-hander as they go over the bridge, so that's going to be crucial as well. But you need faith in being on the wheel of a rider that can corner particularly well, and that's just another element. There's straight line sprints which are important enough, and just that speed, but the skill and ability to take a smooth line into the corner without braking too much. It's all about trust as well, isn't it?
Yeah, my instruction would be to get to the front, or be on the front at 1,500 metres to go, just as we start these traffic islands, because that can cause a little bit of kind of carnage in the peloton. Because if normally at that point you maybe get a lead out on the left hand side, a lead out on the right, and some riders chopping from left to right, and it starts to get a little bit dangerous. So if you want to keep your rider safe and your sprinter safe, you have to be at the front. So it's all about being on the front, and I think Quick Step Floors may manage to do that. You also got Lotto Soudal with Greipel. Greipel won stage 1 and feeling good and looks good as well, but on that final corner it does kind of rise up a little bit towards the line. I wouldn't say that go around that corner with one person in front of you. I think you really have to be sitting maybe third or fourth. Yeah. So if you go round the corner and somebody's already there with their sprinter on the wheel, if you're third or fourth, then I think that's the best scenario. But on a kind of sketchy running, it's always going to be very difficult. We're talking about perfect scenario. To get perfect scenario when you've got 4 or 5 teams with the same thing in mind, it's going to be very difficult. But for sure you have to be in the top 6 if you get any chance of winning on this final stage.
Indeed, no, I'd concur completely there. Lilio Kaiser still leading, Jens Kukalera in 2nd there. Now interesting that Jempe Drucker has moved up the outside. TJ Van Garderen just sat behind him. And I think then we move back to Miles Scottson, just sat behind your race leader, Pat Bevan. And looks to be, given the formation there, we've obviously got Stefan Kung in the mix. It may be one for Jürgen Roelandts, because Jürgen Roelandts can take a corner at speed. We know he's a great bite handler. He's already finished in the top 5. 5th place on the opening stage. Be interesting to see, because they do have a definite couple of sprint options. Jem Pidroka very, very fast, but maybe at the moment Roelandts just has the edge. Yes, and
it will be interesting to see what BMC do. First and foremost, they want to protect that green jersey. Whether they allow the likes of Roelandts or Jem Pidroka to try anything in the final, we'll have to kind of wait and see in that. But it's going to be an interesting final, because there's a lot of riders that have been sat in a bunch all day, and when they start to see the boards click past, they start to get excited. We're looking at Katusha on the right hand side, GB over on the right hand side coming up, Lotto Sudal on the left. Quick Step Floors are very good at kind of sitting back and coming up at the right time. Team Dimension Data, they're looking at possibly Scott Thwaites trying to get up there as well. So, you know, they're coming up with the green helmets on. It's certainly going to be an interesting one. Bardiani thinking about it as well, moving up. So this is going to be a pretty hectic sprint.
I think it is. As I said, Dimension Data have 2 options as well. Mark Renshaw, the aforementioned Scott Thwaites. I just saw Robert Thompson moving up, just protecting his riders. So Dimension Data will certainly want to win. They've had a good day though, because they've got the new King of the Mountains. Well, they kept it in-house. Scott Davis leading that classification into today, but Nick Lamini, by virtue of his sterling efforts today, racking up the points on the mountains, he'll be in the lead. But a stage win is what these teams are after as one. 5.8 to go, 14 seconds to lead for our 4 riders out in front. Or should I say 3 riders out in front. A big attack by the man in the lead now, Port Orsolin. Meant that Alex Patton was the last rider to go back to the peloton. So with 3 riders out in front now, Hayden McCormick, Paul Orsolin and Matt Holmes. Matt Holmes will be in the sprint jersey at the end of today. Great day for him. 5.4 to go now, 13 seconds. I mean, Brian, fair play to the 6, all of the 6 riders. 3 have now gone back, but to only get caught with around 3 kilometres to go potentially, they've ridden exceptionally well today, because that bunch is moving at pace, and these riders still being led by one pro cyclist, Hayden McCormack. Sterling effort from them. And we know that, I feel that you feel that Matt Holmes deserves the Combativity Award, but it might go to somebody else, and it might be that a final roll of the dice from Orsolin or McCormick now that seals that classification, or that award.
We've been talking about how easy it is in a stage like this to sit in the peloton all day and then get organised for the sprints. So hats off to the breakaway. It's not been easy terrain, it's been up and down. They have had to race the whole way, and they have raced up the King of the Mountains and also the sprints. So they're hanging on. They will be caught very soon, but now we're starting to see the teams with the sprinters coming up towards the 4, trying to take control of this one. They all know from the road book that it's quite a dicey to run in with the traffic islands. Positioning in that last corner is going to be key. We're starting to see them kind of bunching up, but when you've got small teams of 6, some riders already lost, riders, it's very difficult to go from this length out. In the past, even with 8 riders, when you have a lead out going with 3 kilometres to go, but I think nearer the 2 would be most perfect.
Indeed. Well, Matt Holmes has now gone back. The last attack here by Frenchman Paul Orsolin. Thinking, I think, about that Combativity prize. Hayden McCormack just fights to get back in contact into the slipstream of the Frenchman, who's still driving hard with just over 4Ks to go. On the right-hand side there, just drifting over. Matt Holmes finally captured by the rampaging peloton. The dual arrowhead formation at the moment. Teams desperately trying to get their sprinters into position. Nils Pollitt leading on the right-hand side there.
GB leading the front of the Permpton. They did that yesterday. So, and Ethan Hayter got up there in 4th place. This is a very different sprint from yesterday. We're expecting some of the faster riders to be up there. Very different sprint from yesterday.
Look at this. Well, I've never seen such a Combativity Award being battled out. I mean, they are trading blows like 2 boxers on their very last legs in the ring into the 12th round, but finally they are caught. It is Dimension Data who bring back the remnants of the breakaway. So it is Gruppo Compatto all together as we head onto the streets of Royal Leamington Spa. 3.4 kilometres to go. Remember, it's a very long, meandering run in to the line. The last 350 metres, give or take 1 or 2 metres. 90-degree harsh left-hander onto Newbold Street. And the winner will be crowned. Team Sky moving up as well. More about protecting Walt Pauls. I think they do not have a designated sprinter, but we're used to Team Sky doing this, mixing it with the sprint teams. Vasil Kirienka, the former world road race champion, world time trial champion, on the front lip, driving this bunch along. Walt Pauls in a 3rd position. Stefan Kung just behind. And now we've seen Taylor Phinney just on the outside there. Moving up there, trying to get Sasha Modolo into position. Also Tom Pidcock for Wiggins there in the red jersey too.
Well, just talking about the traffic islands there, you can just see them splitting around them the whole time. They want the quickest way around these roads, and very difficult when it splits, comes back, splits, comes back. So a lot of riders really fighting for position, but it's Team Sky with Walt Pauls in 3rd place. They want to try and keep him safe, while there's a lot of other riders just sitting back, waiting. We did say you really have to take this one from the front. This is a fast run-in. Mark Renshaw is the rider in 2nd place, right up there towards the front. Alex Dowsett is waiting to come here, but Ian Stannard is doing a very good job of looking after Walt Pauls in 2nd place.
He certainly is, the former British road race champion. What an engine he has got, driving hard on the front. Double winner of Het Nieuwsblad, classic specialist, using his raw power. Now we've got Sasha Modolo squad, EF Education first. Drapak powered by Cannondale, driving hard on the front. 1700 metres to go. There are several traffic islands coming up very, very shortly. 2nd position is Taylor Phinney. Dan
McClay's in 4th place, so Modulo's in front of him. So as we suspected, Dan McClay is possibly the rider being given the nod here, but over the top now comes from Alex Dowsett. With Caleb Ewan being brought up, he's been brought up to a very good position.
And now Fernando Gaviria moving up. He got the rider on the front yesterday's stage winner Julian Alaphilippe. Alex Dowsett just behind with a big K on his back. Then we got the Luxembourg road race champion Bob Youngles in 2nd position. Taylor Phinney in the pink there in 4th position. Well, couple more traffic islands to go, and in about 600 metres time they will turn left. 1 kilometre to go now. Destination Royal Leamington Spa. It's going to be a raging bunch sprint. Still yesterday's stage winner Julian Alaphilippe. He's looking after, of course, Fernando Gaviria, 3rd on the opening stage. This is a very chaotic finale. Alex Dowsett there in 2nd position. The former world hour record holder Taylor Phinney fighting on his wheel as well. Who is going to lead it into the final left-hander? An absolute thriller now, and it is Lotto Soudal moving up the outside. This is going to be a massive battle for this left-hander. Absolutely crucial that you get your sprinter into a very good position coming up the inside. Well, it is Pat Bevan in the green jersey moving up the inside. Pat Bevan himself, a very, very good finisher, the New Zealander. Here they are, they're round the final corner. Bevan into the lead, Taylor Phinney in 2nd position. It's Andre Greipel in 3rd position too. Here Rujas is there as well. And that's Dan McClay. Well, it's Sasha Modolo on the wheel of Andre Greipel. Modolo in the slipstream of Andre Greipel. Greipel leads, is gapping Modolo. Greipel looking at stage win number 2 here. Greipel, the Gorilla of Rostock, takes victory number 2 on the streets of Royal Leamington Spa. Wow, what a demonstration of sprinting there by Andre Greipel. So experienced. That's his 8th win in the Tour of Britain. A thrilling finale, no doubt at all. Nothing that Modolo could do about that. Wonderful victory by Greipel.
Slightly uphill there, and Greipel showed that he's got the power, confidence, and he just powered away at the front there. Pat Bevan took a 3rd place and took some bonus seconds there, 4 seconds, so he increases his lead there. But 2 sprints that Greipel's been involved with now, and he's won both of them, so he's on really, really good form. All about positioning into that final corner there. And it did look as if Education First got that right. Pat Bevan came up late in the inside and got himself in a very good position. Quick Step Floors, we'll have to look back on that. I think it was Movistar had Barbero was up there in the end, but it was all about positioning into that corner. 300 metres to go. Greipel came round at, I think, in about 4th, maybe 5th place, and powered away to another victory here in the Tour of Britain. Just see it coming round here, and with speeds. It was, he came into 3rd place there, and he sits there. He's got Taylor Phinney in front of him. Pat Bevan is going. He just powers. Bevan did the right thing. He came up quickly on the left-hand side, but you can just see the power of Greipel. Murderlow was just trying to kind of hang on to this wheel. He's increasing his lead the whole way towards the finish. All about positioning into that final corner with 300 metres to go, and an easy win in the end for Greipel.
Well, a bit fortunate, Samsic, the team he's moving to next year, rubbing their hands with glee. He can never write this man off. That is his 7th win in the Tour of Britain, his 2nd win in this edition. And there it is, victory. An almost nonchalant salute there by the rider from Lotto Soudal. But that was a wonderful bit of riding by the New Zealander, Pat Bevan. Real panache there, right up the inside, slingshotted into the corner. Taylor Phinney also there in a key position, but Modolo had the ideal position here, didn't he? But there was nothing he could do about the sheer raw power of Andre Greipel in full flight. He actually started to distance the Italian, but it was slightly uphill to the line. But look at that, just look at the muscles there twitching, powering through. That's got to be near, well, touching about 1800 watts through the bike there.
You just see a Zabo up there for Katusha, but Dan McClay was there. It looks as if he might be in the top 10, but the question for me is, where were Quick-Step floors?
Yeah, very unusual. I mean, unless Gaviria wasn't feeling too strongly, but we did see Alaphilippe and Bob Jungels. It was a very technical run, and as you say, all of those additional traffic islands do make it quite chaotic, very stressful indeed. But certainly Alaphilippe and Bob Jungels were doing their best to get Gaviria into position, but those two were riding near the front. But I could not see Gaviria in the top 10 heading into that first corner, and certainly didn't make an impression. No doubt about the winner anyway. Andre Greipel, win number 2 for him in the Tour of Britain this year. And there we go, confirmation of the stage result today. Andre Greipel of Lotto Soudal and Germany takes the win ahead of Italy's Sasha Modolo, running for EF Education first. Pat Bevan, the race leader, superb ride by him in 3rd, takes that extra 4-second time bonus as well. Then we have Rick Zabel, Carlos Barbero, Emils Liepins, good ride by him, Romicardi, and then a clutch of British riders, McClay, Tennant and Gabs Culleg of Wiggins, rounding out the top 10. And that will mean, Brian, as you mentioned, an increase in the general classification lead for Pat Bevan. He'll be on his own, his own time by right. Equal on time going into the day, now 4 seconds to the good. Well, welcome back to Royal Tunbridge Wells, the end of stage 4 of the OVO Tour of Britain. Royal Tunbridge Wells been given its royal status back in 1838, and royal status today is Pat Bevan, who has increased his lead on the top of the general classification by 4 seconds over Cameron Mayer, courtesy of that 4-second time bonus he got for 3rd place today. Julian Alaphilippe still in 3rd at 6. Jash Sutterlin of Mobistar 4th at 16 seconds. Then we have Pauls, Hamilton, Jungels, Roglic, and then Hugh Carthy, the best placed British rider for EF Education first, and rounding out your top 10 after 4 stages of the OVO Tour of Britain. It's Scott Davis of Dimension Data, 26 seconds adrift. Brian, a real demonstration of sprinting there from Andre Greipel. Yet again, 36 years of age, but he never fails to kind of surprise us, does he? Okay, no wins in Grand Tours this season, but he looks hungry, doesn't he? And we were talking about it in the break. The move, of course, to the French team next year is going to be a very interesting one, but clearly, you know, I think for the next couple of years, Andre Greipel will deliver again. But good to see, and he's a very, very likeable character, popular in the peloton, and it's good to see him in winning form again. That's his 8th win this season. He
did make it look easy. Okay, it's not a Grand Tour, but there's some very good sprinters in this race, and he's definitely motivated and a bit more relaxed. He was trying to obviously stay with Lotto Soudal, but the fact that he hasn't won at the Tour de France over the last couple of years. Caleb Ewan never got a chance to ride the Tour de France, and Lotto Soudal looking for the next big sprinter. But Greipel certainly on some good form here at the Tour of Britain.
Well, we've got a different stage tomorrow. It is a team time trial, first uphill team time trial I'm going to have the pleasure of commentating on in Cockermouth. So from Royal Leamington Spa, we're going to move tomorrow up north. And there we go, Cockermouth to Winletter team time trial, uphill team time trial, 14 kilometres in length. Make sure you join us here for what will be another thrilling stage of the OVO Tour of Britain. Your race leader currently is Pat Bevan, so make sure you join us then at 1400 hours CET. So from Royal Leamington Spa, from me and Brian Smith, who had the pleasure of commentating on yet another thrilling stage. It's been a wonderful OVO Tour of Britain so far, and we still have some extremely challenging stages yet to come. There's a big sprint fest finale today. That final left-hander was crucial. Bob Youngles leading through. Alex Dowsett in his slipstream, and then very, very late up the inside came Pat Bevan, who start to emerge very, very shortly. It's all going to be about that final corner. And the man from New Zealand riding for the American-Swiss team BMC, taking that final left-hander at his own speed, cutting the apex in front of Taylor Phinney there. Phinney struggling to hold on to the wheel of the flying New Zealander, really starts to open things out, but then emerging from the slipstream of Phinney in the red jersey, absolutely thundering down the finishing straight here. Andre Greipel, arrow straight en route to win number 2. Second place for Sasha Modolo. Third place for Pat Bevan, who increases lead in the general classification. Well, from Royal Leamington Spa, it's been a pleasure yet again. We'll see you tomorrow. But for now, from me and Brian Smith, it's goodbye.